are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me once again, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Kevin, the Flyers have a president of hockey ops.
They do?
And it's not any of these names we heard. There weren't even a ton of names floating around, but we heard a few. Mm-hmm. Not Ron Francis. Who am I thinking of? Doug Wilson was a name that was floating around. Ron Francis, Doug Wilson, they're the same player. It's fine. So that was a name that floated around, and it turns out a name floated around starting about Wednesday-ish, and by Friday it had gotten the steam that Keith Jones has been named as the president of hockey ops for the Philadelphia Flyers. And in a joint statement that surprised absolutely zero people, the interim tag was removed from Danny Briere. He is the Philadelphia Flyers full-time GM moving forward. That is something we all expected. Keith Jones, though, is not something that a lot of people expected. Kevin, when did you first hear about this, and where did this come from?
Same time that everybody else seemed to, for the most part. I mean, there was some talk. I'm trying to think of who exactly said it first or whatever.
I heard it was Elliot Friedman on 30.
Well, I think that Elliot Friedman that's not the first place I heard Keith Jones. The first place I heard Keith Jones from was Frank Sarvalli.
Okay. Shocker.
What I heard from Elliot Friedman, if I'm not mistaken, kind of as the week built up, was they like at the beginning there were a lot of names floated out there. This guy could be considered, this person could be considered. We had, you had the two assistants from Vancouver that, Emily Castonguay, Cami Granato. So it wasn't just guys. Let's make that clear.
Fair enough.
And Friedman said something along the lines of, there's all this information out there. They've kind of gotten it more under wraps, and there's possible candidates out there that we don't know.
Yeah.
That we just know that there's a lot of activity. They're nearing the finish line with this, and there's possibly something we don't know. And I think that the only hint of this that I think existed was, let's not forget the other name that was really floated around from the beginning almost, which was Eddie Olczyk, which is a very similar vein to Keith Jones. Let's be real. They were they were on the same broadcast team on the same network, during the playoffs. So it's, that part's not really shocking. It's kind of I guess the sudden nature of which these are the two finalists.
And then boom, here it is. It's Keith Jones.
I think it became more obvious once it was realized that Keith Jones was in this, that it was going that direction more. I couldn't envision a world where if the choice is between Keith Jones and Ed Olczyk, that Ed Olczyk is somehow or other going to win out on that. I just couldn't envision that happening. Believe me, I actually thought and we hadn't talked much, or not talked much. We hadn't done a show, is what I kind of am referring to. We'd had a couple weeks, right? So in a couple weeks' time, most of the names that were out there had faded away, and Eddie Olczyk's name was becoming more and more prevalent, actually. So I kind of actually thought maybe as early as maybe roughly as close as a week before the announcement came, that it was going to be him. I really kind of thought that was the direction we were headed, because remember what I told you last time on our last show, that there's this concept that they're looking for, and I think it became very apparent and we'll get into the press conference and all that. It became very apparent they're looking for somebody who can bridge the gap between everybody, right? That this is not just about your president of hockey operations and you make decisions. It's not just that. It's bridge the gap to business, bridge the gap to the fans, all of that. And if you're looking for somebody who's a communicator, then, you can do worse than someone who's been broadcasting for 20 some odd years.
Yep. 23 years in broadcasting, 17 in the booth. It's certainly interesting. It's an interesting note if you think about it, that Comcast hires Jones from NBC. It's all kind of in the same family here.
Right.
It's a bit of an inbred promotion. We expect no different out of the Philadelphia Flyers, to be honest. Which kind of gets me to the main point. Now, the big headline kind of coming out of this day where we got these media announcements was that it's two former Flyers.
Right.
And it is and it isn't. Yes, both guys wore the orange and black, etc. Ask a random fan how long Keith Jones is a Philadelphia Flyer. Now, I'm sure you probably know it. If you didn't know before Friday, I'm sure you've heard since Friday. Keith Jones played in Philadelphia for 131 games over the span of 2.5, 3 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of his career.
Right.
Keith Jones is not a Philadelphia Flyer. He's a guy who ended up in Philly. Danny Briere obviously was in Philadelphia a little bit longer, a little bit more substantial line of work, a little bit more playoff success.
Just a little, don't you think?
More playoff success than anybody not named Leon Draisaitl. We'll get into them later. So it's a little bit different, but if you ask a lot of people, and especially a lot of people in upstate New York, Danny Briere is a Buffalo Sabre. When you think about the player. We've talked about this being a problem in this organization before, that, we keep hiring the same old guys and keep recycling the same stuff, and this is not that. That being said, personally, I'm thrilled about the Danny Briere. I don't even want to call it a hire. He's been the GM for 3 months, in all honesty.
Let's make something very clear, because this really is an easy thing to say about Briere, because they all flat out said it. There was nobody else considered.
No.
It's been his job since he got it. And when I think the only question was, depending on who they hired for the president role, that person was, I guess, going to be able to potentially sit there and say, I want to go in a different direction. Right. Obviously, Keith Jones does not have an objection here. That John Tortorella doesn't. So it seems pretty obvious. I mean, that's why it was so obvious that it was going to be his job, because ultimately when it came down to it, there was no speculation on anything else. Nobody else had the job, straight up. No. Nope. Nobody got interviewed. Nobody got involved in the process. It's been his since the day that Chuck Fletcher got fired.
And frankly, everything we've heard out of him has been, again, he's still continuing to deliver the right message that, it's going to be a process.
Yeah, he's remained consistent. Yep. You got to give him that.
Absolutely. And Keith Jones came in and, echoed that same message, and everyone is on board here. It certainly seems, and again, when you hire a guy who spent the last, most of the last 17 seasons across the arena level from you, it's pretty easy to get everyone on the same page. And it seems like that's what the Flyers have here. And it's going to depend. And this is something that I've, said off the air, and I've said in, text message in various forms. Does this matter? Will this lead to a change in the way the Flyers organization has been going over the last decade and a half or so? Mm-hmm. Roughly since the 2010 Cup run. And the answer to that question is, well, it depends. Because it seems as though things are trending in the right direction. But until we get word, officially or unofficially, that Bob Clark, Paul Holmgren, and Bill Barber are no longer in the front office, the press release concerned me, but just some weird lines about addressing the old wise men. It was a strange press release. But assuming they are gone, okay, I don't really care. Honestly, I don't even know if I really care if they hang out for a little longer over the summer, as long as they don't have any real potential input. But as long as it's clear to everybody that they're gone by the time the season starts, I think we're moving in the right direction here. Quite frankly, I hope they're gone tomorrow. I hope they're not involved in the draft process or the free agent process or the trading process or any of the above, or else, don't give Bob Clark more ammo to go bitch on a podcast about, but that's a whole different thing. Don't let him into your draft conversations. But if they are there, it should certainly be with the understanding that they won't be there for very much longer. And if that doesn't happen, if we go into next season and these guys are still there, I don't expect long-term change.
And all that's fair. I assume the release you're talking about was the New Era release, not
It's a new era of orange, Kevin.
Look, I'm shaking my head at that one because of the fact that this franchise has really come up with some head-scratching mottos over the years and
fly or die
taglines
will
and all
just
this
go
stuff.
down in history.
You know,
Fly or die is the best of all time, and you
I mean,
cannot convince me otherwise.
here's because like I'm curious to know, or like kind of what lines you're pointing out, so to speak. Because I'm just trying to look at it, and it's just, I'm like, I have the statement or the new era of orange, welcome to the new era of orange, that kind of thing in there.
Yeah, so it wasn't that press release. It was the article that went along with it.
So you're talking about the I guess you're talking about stuff from the statement of the actual announcement then.
Yes.
So in other words, hearing things like I got to imagine it's about things like, talking about storied histories and I guess I know there were lines about not looking, away from the past, but also
Yeah, I'm trying to find
carving out
it,
a
but
future.
it
Like
I
to
remember
me,
it said I think it was the dawn of a new era is the one it was. Yes, it was. Criticism, this is a quote directly from the statement. The statement is titled The Dawn of a New Era, Jones and Briere added to Flyers front office. Posted by Brian Smith. Shout out to Brian Smith, it's great writing. Criticism is out there that again, the Flyers have again, no, never mind, it wasn't that one. I'm sorry. It was... Okay, and that takes us to the recent notion of wise men and advisors controlling things and keeping the Flyers like they were in the past. All of that is a myth. The Flyers have very active and passionate alumni, some of whom have worked for the team. But the idea that alumni are sitting around in Voorhees telling people what to do is pure fiction. Yes, they are available for opinion on a given topic if anyone asks for it. Anyone in any business leadership position will turn to people they trust for advice on any given situation, and any Flyers executive or staffer would be foolish not to reach out for pertinent advice from two people who have combined for nearly 100 years of service to the organization because of some false perception that they have a level of influence that they don't. But make no mistake, final decisions on anything, whether made by Briere, Jones, Hoferty, Camillo, or Tortorella, will be made by those individuals or that group alone. But yes, they actually wrote in an article on the team's website that presumably was approved by the team. They really wrote
that last paragraph.
The idea that alumni are sitting around in Voorhees telling people what to do is pure fiction.
I mean...
And then you immediately go on to say, well, they don't tell people what to do, but, of course people ask them for advice, and they should. Okay, so they have influence.
It's contradictory to an extent.
So you're telling me they don't step forward and offer the advice, but it is certainly correct to go to them and ask them.
Well, and I assume that the purpose of that line or of those sentences are that they don't really like. Bob Clark doesn't necessarily live in the area per se, but it doesn't mean he's not a phone call away either. Like, right. I understand. I'm not sitting here saying that they have dedicated offices in Voorhees, that they're at the draft table and all of that. I'm not saying that. But what we are saying is that, like, and here's the thing. You're not going to tell me that those people did not have some level of involvement, again, probably because they were asked.
Bob Clark went on a podcast. Well, we all wanted to draft McCarr. Well, first of all, no, you wanted to draft Miro Heiskanen, but whatever. Well, we all said we should have drafted McCarr. Okay, so you have influence. You were attempting to influence Ron Hextall at the time, and you failed in that influence, which is why you ended up canning it. But you admitted on that podcast, Bob, that you have influence on the team.
I think that there's some things that are a little off base there because you're going back to 2017 draft when Hextall was still in charge.
That's fair.
I got to imagine that the point of that is that some things have changed in the last 5 years in that respect.
Chuck Fletcher has never been known for his backbone in terms of his bosses. Come on now.
No, and I didn't say that. Like, because let's put it this way. I told you he doesn't make decisions on his own. Chuck Fletcher never made decisions on it was all kind of like,
and Ron Hextall did, and that was the problem, and that's what we've been coming back to for the last 2 years on this show.
And that's whatever. Like at this point in time, you want to define a new era and you want to talk about new voices and new perspectives, then those
Theirs
people
have
don't
to be
sound like,
gone.
well, but then it sounds like they won't be. You know what
Good.
I mean? Like again, if you want to define it today as they're available, fine. Define it as they're available. But
Sure.
but they don't need to be ever present. That's what you're talking about. Ever present is not good.
No.
And I'm sorry, it's tough to convince people. And that's why, like, you can say, I'm not denying the part where it's a myth that they control the whole thing. I've told you that they don't make the
Right.
day-to-day decisions. They're not putting the team physically together. But when it came to key decisions, like who's the next general manager or who's whatever, and guess what? This time around, I never heard their names one time.
Nope. No, in fact, I believe it was said directly that they were not consulted on specifically firing Chuck Fletcher and putting Danny Briere in that spot. And the fact that Danny Briere was put there without their consideration, and then the interim tag was removed, presumably also really without their consideration, is a fantastic step in the right direction. And I do believe that they will be gone, effectively immediately. If they are not, is where I have the problem. But I do think that at this point the organization is going to close the door on the bullies, finally.
Well, and look, that should be all that matters. I don't think you're getting what you completely want, which is a formal announcement. I don't think it's ever coming.
Fair enough.
And they're never going to, I'm not going to say never going to push them completely out the door, but like, let's be real about something. What is next year? Next year is the 50th anniversary of the 1974 Stanley Cup. They're going to be around.
Yep.
Do you know what I did like from a lot of what I've heard to an extent? First of all, the biggest thing about the press conference was first of all, obviously the presence of all 5 people that are part of this group.
Yeah.
But specifically the presence of Dan Hilferty.
Yes.
Because let's remember that ownership representation, the governor of the team, the representation of Comcast itself has been invisible for anywhere between, at this point, 15, 16 months. Maybe you're going on almost a half a year. I mean, we're talking January 2022 when the aggressive retool press conference was had. And that's the last time anybody saw Dave Scott.
Yep.
So, and pretty much the last time anybody heard from him in a newsworthy fashion, other than people throwing his name, like I did, throwing his name in articles to reference the fact that he doesn't seem to be around, until the announcement that he was resigning from the position, that he was retiring. Right?
Fair enough.
You get Dan Hilferty in front of people, and I think this is important because this is exactly what you do with your alumni too. He says, I'm not going to be Ed Snyder. Nobody else can be Ed Snyder. But you know what I am going to do? I'm going to walk around the arena. I'm going to be present. I'm going to talk to people. That's important.
Dan Hilferty's going to be a real popular guy.
And I think that when that news came out, I think there was always a hint of possibility that that's the type of guy he was going to be. I think there was hope that was what he was going to be. That instead of getting some invisible ownership representation like they had, you're going to get somebody who's a little bit more around. You're going to, what's the thing that the Flyers seem to need more from that? It's not like, and I've said this, I kind of have said this before because a lot of people are still on the sell the team bus, and Hilferty also addressed that, by the way. They're not for sale. They won't be all that.
No.
There's an element of you don't want that, because at the end of the day, that's where your money comes from. You want to invest in every resource possible to make you the best team possible. You want that. You want somebody behind it, but you also don't want invisibility. You don't want people to look at who is the owner of the Flyers and be able to come back with a company. You want to be able to point out this guy. Is it a company technically? Yes, but I know who to look for when I need to talk to somebody.
Everybody wants Mark Cuban.
I was going to kind of take it a different direction, and I was going to sit there and say that, you know what you figured out in the last several years, more or less? For the longest time, everybody knew Jeffrey Lurie owned the Eagles, right? And owns the Eagles now, obviously. But how many years, pretty much until the Phillies went out and were going all in to get Bryce Harper, did everybody finally realize who John Middleton was? Right. And now everybody knows who he is, right? You want that. You want a person that you can put, at least that you can recognize. Like, guess what? The Sixers, yeah, Josh Harris is one of the owners of the team, but it's a group. But
Right.
his name and his face are recognizable. That's important. You need to have somebody that you can look to. And, like, at the end of the day, don't you want to go back to, it's still going to be Comcast that owns the team, but don't you want to be able to have them, if whenever this team experiences success again, and it's like, clinching a playoff spot or into the playoffs or whatever, what used to happen back in the day? Something big would happen. They'd win a game in overtime, and then, you get a couple of quick shots, the player celebration. Let's look at the bench. And then, guess where the camera went next? Ed Snyder's box.
Always.
And he's high-fiving people.
Yep.
You want to see that.
And when things are bad, you want the owners, whoever it is, the face of the ownership, to come out and say, we're mad too. We're just as mad as you are, and here's what we're going to do to fix it. And for the longest time, we've had Dave Scott and the corporate Comcast offices.
And Dave Scott tried that. Let's be real. And Dave Scott tried that. Let's be real.
He was awful
He came out.
That was everything he said and did screamed corporate stooge. Everything he said and did screamed corporate stooge.
Go right back to go back to the first thing you just said right after that. He was awful at it. I listened to Dan Hilferty for 5 minutes and knew this guy was better than Dave Scott was. I could totally feel what, and you know what I could really feel, to be honest, that I don't know if I ever felt from Dave Scott in that sense, at least
that
publicly.
He wants the Philadelphia Flyers to win hockey games.
Well,
can it be that simple?
It can be, because you can actually whittle it down to one word: passion.
Passion.
I felt the passion that Dan Hilferty
wants to win.
You know what I really, and I'll whittle it down to 3 more words. You know what I saw from Dan Hilferty to an extent? Okay, that felt like the tenacious Flyers fan, the self-described tenacious Flyers fan.
Absolutely.
Who knows where it came from, but is sitting here going, we have a problem, and this is the group I'm going to battle with. And you know what? Look at my place on this table. I'm sitting smack in the middle. This is, we all are in this. That was the biggest thing about it, was this is all for one for all. If it goes down, we're all going down with it.
The ship is moving in the right direction. At this point, I've expressed my concerns moving forward, and I do think they will be addressed. My only real complaint is that it didn't happen 18 months ago when things really started to go sour, so you gave yourself a shot at Connor Bedard. But as we sit here moving forward, it does look like the Flyers are probably not going to be great next year. Probably not the year after that. Like, we are looking at a rebuild here, folks. We're going to talk about the draft lottery in a few minutes here. It will not be the last time we're talking about the draft lottery on this show over the next couple of years. But in the meantime, take a deep breath, exhale. Things are moving in the right direction. It really seems as though the ship is being turned around.
Right. And it was really important to kind of hear everybody that was part of it. I mean, because I got a couple of different talking points from some of the press conference stuff and things like that, because obviously there was a lot of discussion, and there's been a lot of comments that I've seen that I also want to address, because I think that there's elements of it where, they're either not misunderstood, but I guess people either aren't reading enough to find out what it means, or, and I'm not trying to talk down to readers of my stuff or anything like that, but it's like, I've had a lot of interesting comments come in on different platforms, not directly to me, I'll say it that way, but on, like, on the Sports Talk Philly pages, things like that. All right. Because at the end of the day, first of all, I think that everybody talking rebuild is also important, because you need everybody. Briere said it again. Keith Jones is saying rebuild. Valerie Camillo is saying rebuild. This is important. They know as a business it's being built. They know as a hockey team it's being built. And that's important, to be completely across the board in harmony on that decision, to go down that path. Okay. It was the new era of orange letter thing, kind of, kind of a knockoff of what the Rangers tried to do a little bit. And are you getting saved by anybody in the next 2 years? Probably not. So
another weird thing I wanted to say, this is about the actual press release proper, the new age of orange press release.
New era of orange.
it said ass in it.
Yeah, I know.
Like in an official press release. Like it was just there in like the middle of the paragraph, in the middle of the page, just in white print on a bright orange background. Like it really just popped out at you. And it felt very Jonesy.
No,
If that makes sense.
No, I'll tell you where it came from because I knew exactly what it was as soon as I saw it.
Is it Hilferty?
No, you got 5 people sitting up there, and one of them is John Tortorella. Do you think a press release that goes across 5 people's desks, essentially, including John Tortorella's, didn't get the seal of approval on that line?
That's really funny.
Like I have to imagine. Let's put it this way, the X-Flyer thing. I had, because I wrote something about it in there too, and it's not because again, I said this on our last show. You got a really good chance of it being somebody who used to play for the Flyers. That happens a lot around the league. And guys played everywhere, and
especially the era we're talking about. This was the Flyers get everybody era. Like
that too, sure.
Flyers were in on every free agent forever for about 25 years.
And do you want to know something else too? When you've been a franchise for almost 60 years at this point, there's a good chance you've had a lot of players and a lot of history. And and even if somebody didn't play for you, they may have a connection nonetheless. Like seriously, what if it was Ray Shero? Just hypothetically speaking,
right?
What if it was? And he's got a connection. He never worked for him, never played, never did anything. But his dad
still
did.
Freddie's kid, right?
Right. But his dad did. His dad coached him to a Stanley Cup. Does that still, by association,
probably the greatest coach in franchise history.
Definitely the greatest coach in franchise history. The only one that's gotten him to that level.
Fair
but
enough.
So, like I said, I think that the X-Flyer thing is overblown. It's the problem that people have with the X-Flyer thing is the approach. And if you can do it in a new school way, if you can do it in an evolved way, then sure. And, is there a little something that rubs me the wrong way about Keith Jones being hired? A little. And
Fair.
Only a little. Only because of the fact that
because it could have been you. It's a colleague.
No, it's not that at all.
If you had known it was open, you would have applied for it.
I made this joke a lot that if I just slick my hair back and somehow put on a French Canadian accent, I probably could pass for Danny. I mean, I am his height. I'm kind of his skin complexion. I would say I could probably make a pass. I've stood next to the guy. I know I'm his height.
Does Danny eat some spaghetti and meatballs?
Wait,
come on.
He hating on the chicken parm just like Torts does?
No.
What we're supposed to be saying? All right.
No.
But nonetheless, because here's the interesting part of this, okay? Because timing is everything in some of these things, as you know. Sometimes these things always creep up on you at the worst possible time. So let me give you a timeline of how this week went.
Okay.
Wednesday, or last week anyway. Wednesday was when the report of it's down to 2, and then realistically it was 1 pretty quickly. We knew who was getting hired. Official announcement probably Thursday, right? All that. Okay, that was Wednesday. I woke up on Thursday morning, saw the official announcement, saw the new era thing, and then the official announcement of who's the president, all that type of stuff, right? Wrote that article, and then got it. I hope you saw it. I hope you saw my initial reaction piece that I posted on Friday, because, I went a different direction. Let's just say that I went a different direction because that other people did too, to be honest, because they had the press conference on Friday at Wells Fargo Center, and a particular someone in the music industry was going to be across the street later that night.
Right.
And I may have made a handful of references to that in the article because New Era was a little too perfect.
It's yep.
If you know what I'm getting at.
It was, yep.
There were other musical references in that article for what it's worth. It wasn't just her, but nonetheless. Beside the point, I should also give full disclosure. That's a whirlwind. Like, I'm glad that we didn't do the show on Sunday. Because whirlwind 48 hours for me. Okay, the news is going to come out, right? So I'm prepared for it. It's going to be announced on probably Thursday morning. So I'm prepared for it, but I do have to react to it. And the press conference, I find out, is going to be Friday morning at 11:30.
Right.
which just happened to be the same day as my sister's wedding.
Oh, I thought you were about to tell me you scored a Taylor Swift ticket last minute. You know, I thought we were making allusions to that.
No. This is like a date that has been circled on the calendar for a year and a half.
Yep.
You know, but before it was 2023, this is already circled. Do not do anything on this day. So what day is the press conference?
Of course.
Friday. So I'm like, because realize when you're
I assume you were in the wedding.
Yeah, of course. Now I'm in it, but I don't have anything to do. Like, let's put it this way: Thursday night is rehearsal. That wasn't until 6 o'clock at night, so I had some time. I mean, I had other work to do leading up to as well, but I had time. So that's when I put together the article that I'm going to put out on Friday morning, the reactionary, as I do with every big piece of news that comes out that warrants a reactionary kind of piece, right?
Sure.
Friday, when the press conference happens, now we're in different territory because I've been up since like 6 o'clock in the morning because I had to drive my wife to get hair and makeup done. And then I'm with my dad the entire morning while we wait for everything else to take place. The wedding's at 4. I'm needed where I got to go at 1:30 in the afternoon. The press conference, again, is at 11:30 in the morning. And this is hey, let's just stick Danny Briere in front of a microphone for 20 minutes.
No, this was a full-on
presentation at the Wells Fargo Center.
Uploaded to the YouTube channel in 2 25-minute parts.
with additional separate interviews on the side after the fact.
Yep.
So there's a lot of information to be thrown around.
It was almost a media day.
Right. And I'm trying to watch this in about in the half hour or so span that I have before I have to start getting ready and then leave.
Man, I'm sure you had earbuds and it's way less dramatic, but I'm just picturing you in the corner of a bridal suite with like your phone up to your ear, just trying to listen to what Val Camillo has to say.
So not quite. Well, so not quite, because this is all the preparation period. So we're not even there yet. Where that's the part of it. But I'm like I'm supposed to get a shower. I'm supposed to get into the tux, all that type of stuff. I gotta get ready to go for the thing, and I'm like trying to eat lunch over this, and hopefully drag this out so that I get to at least the end of the part where I don't feel like I have to listen as much anymore. I made it through probably about, if I'm being honest, I made it through all the introductions and I made it through about half of the Q&A before they broke it off and went on into the asides. But let me tell you something about, especially when you're around family at a wedding on a Friday night.
Many congratulations to your sister, by the way. I wanted to throw that out.
Thank you very much. It was, and it was, and by the way, full disclosure, great night. Everything, felt like everything couldn't have gone better.
That's
like
awesome.
Everybody had a great time, and so it couldn't have gone better after that, like all that type of stuff. And I even kind of joked, I'm thankful they made the announcement part on Thursday, so I wasn't sitting there waiting. Well, so I wasn't sitting there on Friday morning going, when's it coming out so I can post this? Like.
Imagine they don't announce it 3:55 Friday afternoon. They drop it.
Well, guess what? 3:55 on Friday afternoon was exactly the time that we were told in the church we were at. Go time,
Yep, I know.
Like, that's it. Anyway, beside the point. Next step. So the thing about when you're at a wedding with family and people know what you do, I had to have been asked at least 10 to 15 times that over the course of that night. What you think?
What do you think?
Jonesy, huh? No,
so what?
Jonesy, huh?
Okay, so now it's been a couple days, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. We are recording on Tuesday evening. So Kevin, Jonesy, what do you think?
So this is where one of the comments comes in. I have nothing against, first of all, nothing against Keith Jones or Danny Briere's people. Two of the nicest guys you could meet. Seriously.
And they seem like it. Yeah.
I mean, and I know that people said that about Chuck Fletcher. I know, but like seriously, these are people who have been around the press box as long as I have, practically, to an extent. I mean, Danny Briere a little less because Danny Briere was still playing at the time,
right?
But Keith Jones has been there for Keith Jones has been there that long. As long as I've been covering games, Keith Jones is there, and he's one of the nicest guys, and can combine the smarts with the humor and has let's be real, knows everybody there is to know. You never have doubts on that. One of the things that I saw some questions about was because I wrote about their inexperience, and a lot of that was met with inexperience. Well, they're really smart hockey guys. Didn't say that.
Right.
What I'm talking about is that I don't know if Danny Briere can negotiate contracts.
Right.
I don't know if he can make trades. I don't know if he can draft.
Right. Does he
I
know?
have no clue.
Does he know if a third line player with 42 points last year is worth a second round pick? Like, does Danny Briere know that, or whatever the deal is? You know
Right.
what I mean?
Now, I hope that he's learned a lot in the years that he's had time to kind of get there, and I'm not going to deny that he's put in the work. So that's not the problem. To be honest, the inexperienced thing is a little less for Keith Jones just because of the fact that, again, this is kind of glorified PR. You really just need to be a springboard to relationships as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
For the hockey side. Like the thing that makes you qualified for the president of hockey operations job in the way it was described is you know everybody.
Yep.
So if you know somebody who's good for the job, go get them. That's the point.
And a lot of times I feel like your president of hockey ops, their role is to manage up and is to basically keep ownership and upper management happy with what the hockey ops team is doing. And
it's a little different, to be honest. It's all in one step.
Right. Well, and how do you have a 5-minute conversation with Keith Jones and not walk away smiling? Like, come on. Mm-hmm. Look at him. He's Jonesy. And so 17 years in the booth, 23 years in broadcasting. Not a whole lot of time in hockey ops. He kind of walked in right after his career ended. Okay. Like I said, I will admit I'm a little nervous.
Mm-hmm. And you should be.
I'm willing to trust the people that are there. But listen, Keith, Danny, if you're listening, and I know you're not, but if you're listening, I have two pieces of advice for you, and it's simple and they're related. 1, hire an analytics department. 2, trust them. That's it.
Well, they have one.
They can get a good one. Make sure they're good. Trust them.
I have some good news for you on this front.
Okay, great.
Not specifically on that front, but I do have some good news for you based on something that Danny Briere did say that I think carries a lot of weight. But I'll give you my answer to the overall thought first, and then I'll give you that piece. Everybody who's out there who's a Flyers fan right now has every right and reason to be skeptical, to be nervous, to wonder if it's going to work, and to be completely honest, to not trust any move that they make, no matter what it looks like.
Fair.
They can hire the 2 nicest guys on the planet. They can hire 2 people that you think are brilliant.
They might have hired the 2 nicest guys on the planet, to be honest.
And if you don't feel like that's the right decision, if you sit there and you go, if your answer is same old Flyers and that your answer is whatever, you have every right to it. I can't take that away from people because that's how much damage has been done over the last 10 years.
Oh, this fan base is scarred, and we deserve to be.
So I can't take that part away.
No.
Now, on that front though, they have all put it. They've put it out there. They've all put themselves out there. This is going on. Let's just say everybody is all in on Danny Briere's ability to be a general manager. Everybody is all in. If Keith Jones is not going to be overseeing every move that's made, and Danny is, then you're all in on him. And you're saying he's ready. There's nobody else for this job. And we're all, again, if he goes down, we're all going to go down with him, potentially. Fine. That's your choice. And again, you have every right to be skeptical of the lack of experience in those areas without having any track record.
Yep.
At least when, because let's be real about something. Ron Hextall's first true GM job was in Philly, but he came from an assistant GM role in LA and was behind a lot of the championship stuff. And people kind of went, well, the track record says this is nothing. What does Danny Briere have other than working under Chuck Fletcher for a year and a half?
The Maine Mariners of the ECHL, which is not a whole lot.
But not to the NHL level. That's what I'm getting at. So if you're afraid because the only NHL experience he's got is under the previous guy, then you have a right to feel that way.
Yeah.
Especially
if there were other forces that, I'm not going to say steering the ship, but maybe had a hand on the wheel, and those are gone now as well, then Danny Briere kind of is on his own a little bit from that sense.
And because of those feelings, and because of the way, as in the word that you use, Kyle, is perfect, scarred. If that's how if that's how you feel, and they haven't earned it from you, and they won't for some time, then I can't sway you in this. But if you're on the fence, or if you're still like, I just want them to be good again, and I hope that they get the right people, and you're in the thing, the best thing you can do is give this a shot then, because it doesn't feel exactly the same. There's something different. Briere definitely doesn't feel the same, and I know he was a long-time Flyer. I don't care about that. He knows today's players.
Right. And think about who Danny Briere was as a player. Think about the words used to describe Danny Briere. Small, quick, athletic, smart, good shot, small. Did I mention small?
Right.
And
well, you're going to bring me to my other two comments, by the way.
So I'm winding us towards kind of the analytics department.
Right.
Danny Briere was always an analytics type player. Hopefully. And okay, if you look at the president/GM power balances, let's say it's roughly 80-20 in terms of your GM does most everything, but the president kind of has final say type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be a nice little blend because Danny Briere is going to bring some of that youth, presumably analytics-minded hockey, I assume. And Keith Jones has a little bit more of that older school boys club eye test. I think it's going to be a really good blend. We've talked about it before. We don't want to go 100% analytics. We don't want to go 100% eye test. We're looking for a blend. I think that's what we have here.
And I want to bring in the third part of the equation then, because the person who we've talked the least about in all of this is John Tortorella, who is going to have more say than the typical head coach does.
Absolutely.
Now risk reward, because sure, you're getting the balance of this. If Danny Briere is going to be more analytical, then Tortorella is going to be more eye test, and that's fine if you blend the two styles together. The risk to me is just don't have a team of a bunch of third line guys running around that can't score goals. And
I don't know. It's working out for Seattle.
But Seattle has the ability to score a little bit, though. Like I can look at some of those third line guys on Seattle and say at least they've got a little bit of scorer's touch. We're not talking about guys, with all due respect to players who have had careers and have made it in some way, that we're not talking about a bunch of Zach McEwens and Nick Delorier's running around.
Oof.
You know what I mean? And that's all I'm saying about.
If those two never played a game for this organization, I would be thrilled.
And that's all that's all I'm saying about it is that I just don't want John Tortorella's complete ideal team unless it's evolved.
I agree.
If it's evolved, then great. But if he's still kind of living,
frankly, I think it has.
I think it has a little bit too because he loves players like Noah Cates and he's got a soft spot for Tippett.
Honestly, even going back to the stuff he was saying on TV about not liking the Michigans and the blah, 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 that even then, to me, that felt a little riled up for the television.
Yeah, it probably was a little.
And he played devil's advocate to be Howard Eskin. And it doesn't mean, and I think he has softened on that over the last couple of years. I think he has seen the success of certain teams, like, quite frankly, 2 or 3 of the teams that have their jerseys up behind you here. We'll get into them in a few minutes when we talk about the playoffs. But at this point in time, it's pretty well established that you need some amount of analytics in your front office if you're going to build a long-term sustainable franchise.
You do. No, you do. I get that. Here's the thing about it, too. And I would hope, look, I haven't asked John Tortorella this specific question, so I'm not going to assume anything from him. But I would hope that this is the way that he thinks as a coach, because it's the way I would think if I was in his shoes. I don't care how you score the goal. Did it help you win the game? If you're the coach and your whole livelihood thrives on success, then I don't care if you do the Michigan, if you bat it out of midair, swing your stick like a baseball bat to knock it into the net. I don't care. Well, scoring a goal is scoring a goal.
And at the end of the day, that's always gonna be how it is, because the general manager's job is to put together the roster. So you have to look at what these players are expected to do over the long haul. And then your coach's job is to win every single game. So their job is to look at what this player's doing right this second.
So I want to put a bow on this with the last two comments that I saw a lot of. And one of them is actually a good segue to the playoff stuff, but we do have one more other thing to talk about before we get to the playoffs. But so the other thing that I saw a lot of was, and this kind of ties back to a lot of stuff combined, well, okay, if you don't like the idea of them hiring ex-Flyers, how did the last outside hire go? And everybody pointed to Chuck Fletcher. Wasn't the guy a Harvard grad? All that type of stuff. Not saying that. I get it. I understand that. I'm not downing the ex-Flyer approach. Or not ex-Flyer approach. I'm not downing the ex-Flyer hire. I'm downing the approach is the point. If the approach doesn't change and you keep hiring the same type of people because you're all like-minded, like there just has to be a little bit of a shakeup. You need
I think that's what has changed.
Right. You need a little bit of differences. I mean, if
Danny Briere is not that.
Right, and if you can be on the same page about your direction, but on not different pages, but have different ideas about the way you get to that chapter, then that's all well and good. I like hearing Tortorella talk about, we're going to argue with each other. Good. You should, because if you're all just sitting there yesing each other to death, you're not going to go anywhere. So good. Test each other. Push it a little bit, And one of the key things, by the way, this goes to your analytics point, but I see, you're looking at analytics. Your answer is the analytics department's not good enough because they're missing opportunities on things. Right. My answer is different, a little different in terms of the weakest point, if you ask me. Because
is it drafting and development? Because
it's not. Well, it's the second.
Holy crow!
Because I really don't think that I won't say at any point in time. Like I'm sure they've made some poor draft picks, but I don't think they've made a ton of poor draft picks on draft night. I think they've done a poor job of getting those players to what they could have been, and that's all development. And this is important. And again, full credit, Crossing Broad, Anthony Sanfilippo wrote this because he asked a question about potential changes around the front office, which I can only assume includes every element that we've talked about: analytics, development, scouting and drafting, and the people that you talk about. Those people too. Advise.
To be fair, right, and to be fair, I do want analytics to be hand in hand with the development. A part of development is identifying what players are strong at, and analytics are a great tool to kind of help identify player strengths and weaknesses and where they can be the most effective in any given lineup. Mm-hmm. So I do think those two things should work hand in hand.
Sure.
But you know what? The best way to get quality players in your system, Kevin?
Well, it is the draft, but I want to read this quote really quick.
Okay.
Because this is what Briere said in response to that very question about changes in the front office, which spans everything, right? We're talking about 4 different areas we just talked about where, you're from your advisors to your scouts to your developmental, your development personnel to your analytics, right? All sorts of areas. This includes everything. And Briere said exactly this. And again, Crossing Broad, Anthony Sanfilippo got this. There will be some changes that will occur in the next few months. That's where having the chance to be inside the last 2+ years and dealing with every department on the hockey side, I was able to find out where our strong spots are, where our weaker spots are, and what we need to improve on. You haven't seen too much yet because I wanted to get Keith's opinion on it. I didn't want to get too ahead of myself because I wanted to respect the process. But things are going to happen everywhere. That sounds like a very well calculated answer. That sounds like somebody who's going to be diligent with the process.
Sounds like a guy who has a to-do list.
It sounds like somebody who is proving exactly why they didn't talk to anybody else, because he's going to have his finger on if Danny Briere can have his finger on every aspect of this organization in hockey operations to the point where all Keith Jones has to do is essentially advise and report back to business and come up with better ways to make the whole thing work. And again, Keith Jones not only knowing every person that you could hire in any particular role, but also knowing every player because he was a broadcaster for so long.
I think a lot of Keith Jones's job is going to be buying the first round. But either way, good for them.
Could be.
Yeah, I think he's going to spend a lot of time hanging out with people, and I think, quite frankly, I think Danny Briere is going to do a good job, and it might take a little time. It might take a little growing pains. Obviously, there's a bit of a teardown to be done here. I mentioned Nick Delorier never playing again, and unfortunately, that's not going to be the case.
No, but we all know one name that we think is on the way out the door, and it's probably true.
Oh, I was listening to one of the more recent 32 Thoughts. They're pumping episodes out so quickly, I can't remember if it was the most recent or the one before that. But they brought up the Philadelphia Flyers briefly, and Elliot Friedman rattled off real quick. Hart, Provorov, Konechny, gone. He expects them to be gone.
Seriously, see, I didn't hear that one yet.
And yeah, and I don't know.
I think that might be a little extreme, to be honest.
Right,
I think he's all of that.
I think he's looking at the situation and making some assumptions more than any like actual concrete hearing anything.
You know what? I want to pump the brakes a little bit on some of the stuff that Elliot. Like, look, we respect the hell out of Elliot Friedman. We've said that on the show for months on end, right?
Oh, years.
There's a lot of stuff though on the podcast that he has that he comes out and says a lot of.
He just throws it out there. Yep.
Well, no, but it's I think, and I could say the same thing. Listen, I could read the situation and say I think that they might do this. There's not near as much concrete because
I agree.
And listen, and look, some of that's strategic because if you work in absolutes, you're going to get burned in his role, right?
I work in sales, and I don't even tell people that their couch is definitely going to be here in 2 weeks.
Exactly. No, now the one that I do buy, by the way, is the consistent mentioning of Kevin Hayes and the Columbus Blue Jackets. I do buy that. I think that there's a lot of smoke there, and I don't think that let's put it this way: what
the Johnny Gaudreau tampering committee takes on in Newtown.
But like, what's changed from the exit interview process to now, other than Keith Jones getting hired? What's changed?
Not much.
So I don't think if the thought was there then, I think the thought still exists now.
I don't think that's a player who wants to be in Philadelphia, and I think that's pretty clear. And I don't think John Tortorella particularly wants him in Philadelphia. But all right, can we get into the draft here?
Sure.
All right, so speaking of a new player that will be in Philadelphia, if the Flyers keep this pick, which is certainly not a guarantee, the Flyers will pick 7th in the upcoming NHL draft. They did not win the draft lottery. There was remarkably little change at the lottery, really just the flipping of the top spots, leading to the Chicago Blackhawks getting the first overall pick and landing the right to draft Connor Bedard. Kevin.
Yeah.
What you got?
Nothing really on the Flyers front. I mean,
you didn't win a lottery. You only had a 6.5% shot at winning. There's really no story here.
I was gonna say, be thankful you didn't drop. Is more
Fair.
the thing, at this point. Like, realize that you actually have a greater chance going into that to pick 8th than 7th when it comes around. In that sense, like you really actually have a greater chance of at least watching one team behind you advance past you, so you drop a spot.
Right. The fact that there was little change was actually good for the Flyers.
Right. Like, if nothing else, watching as the cards were being flipped and watching as number 9 went over, and it's like, okay, good, no change. Number 8 went over. Okay, good, no change. This is it. Moment of truth. It's either 1, 2, or 7. And at this point, fine. Look, it's a 6.5% chance at 1. Take 7 if that's what you're going to get.
Right.
You made your bet anyway by winning games at different points in the season. We know this. We already are there. Whatever the case may be. Again, I feel like we had this discussion when we talked about all the stuff with the Chicago Blackhawks, however many moons ago at this point. It's been a little while, obviously, since that particular show. And the reason why it was the way it was. It was because when that whole scandal came out with the Chicago Blackhawks, the thing that hurt the most from our perspective was the timeline of the events that were going on and sweeping it under the rug. And it's, because we can't be inconvenienced in the Stanley Cup final in 2010 against the Flyers. And it's like, okay, so that hurts a little bit.
Yep.
Right. That hurts a little bit. But what about, what about the repercussions of that is basically the point. Like,
the fact that the Chicago Blackhawks didn't sacrifice any draft capital is insane. And they were fined what, $1.5 million, $2 million,
$2 million,
something like that.
$2 million.
They made more money.
They made it all back in
season
that night.
Ticket sales in the first 90 minutes.
Yep.
They made $2.5 million. They made more money in the first 90 minutes than they were fined for sexual abuse and covering it up, and a grand conspiracy to cover it up for more than a decade.
Right. Something that, by the way, has since unlocked more of these types of things being uncovered. This is, if it's not for Kyle Beach, then we're not. I don't know if we're talking about
Hockey Canada. Yeah.
Right. I don't know if we get that far. It opened doors for investigations like this to happen.
Yep.
And here's the thing, like, The people who are out here, no, the people who are out here kind of beside themselves about the luck of the Chicago Blackhawks in terms of just trading away Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves is leaving the team one way or the other at the end, at the end of this season, whether it's, whether he does play somewhere else or whether he just decides to retire. He's played his last game in Chicago, obviously.
He plays anywhere else, honestly.
I don't feel like it is either.
Not with what he's gone through.
I agree with you, but either way, that doesn't bother me. If you finished in the bottom 3 in the league and then get the lotto poll,
right? That is what it is.
Lines up, and it just lines up with when you traded Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves is no longer going to be part of the team. Right. Yeah, does it seem a little like there's nothing rigged about it?
The tanking was a little blatant for some people. I do understand.
You know what though? At the same time, and I do agree a little bit. Like, is the tanking a little suspicious in terms of like they won 6 of their last 25? Come on,
man.
And I get that. The Anaheim Ducks only were in the top spot in the potential lotto poll because of the fact that they lost 13 straight down the stretch. Timing is everything. They didn't win a game in the last 3-4 weeks of the season. You're not going to tell me that at some point in time you look and you realize what's at stake and the losses don't matter as much anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Of course.
I think that there were more than just the Chicago Blackhawks who were guilty of it. I think what people look at with Chicago isn't even the 6 in the last 25 thing. It's the trades that it's trading away perfectly.
The team they iced after the trade deadline was
it's trading away 2 perfectly good young players in Alex DeBrincat and Kirby Dach and saying, you know what, we don't need you anymore. We're not going to do this. It was keeping Kane and Taves around for as long as humanly possible. Kane wasn't even completely healthy at different points in the season. Taves had all the health issues too. It was but I can't fault them for health issues per se because by that logic, the Flyers did that.
No, it's Dach and DeBrincat that are the
right. It's trading away guys and things like that, and I get it. So,
and that's what okay.
But all of that being said, the part that I just can't get over is the part where they didn't get hit with draft capital for a league-wide, nationwide, all over the news scandal, and having covered it up for a decade.
Yep,
that bothers me. I'm sorry, that bothers me in a big way. And the
Rocky
funny part
Wirtz
was
on the ownership executive board.
Well, and beside the point at this point, I get that, that is relevant. I have people I had Chicago because I retweeted somebody who had kind of expressed the same thing and agreed with the same thing. That's the hardest part of it. It's not it's not rigged. It's not that they tanked. None of that matters to me. They lost a bunch of games. You kind of can't it's weird. You can't prove that they tanked per se down the stretch because they want for God's sakes, the entire playoffs could be shaken up by the fact that they won a game against Boston, or what was it? One game against Boston, or was it a game against Pittsburgh? I think it was. They won against
somebody
Pittsburgh.
Down the stretch. Yeah,
no, because it was they won against Pittsburgh, which helped keep Pittsburgh out of the playoffs, helped put Florida in the playoffs, got them the lotto spot that ended up winning. It all influenced a bunch of stuff.
Insane. Yep.
So I can't go there with that. But I had somebody who is clearly a Chicago fan. And I can't believe that they're Chicago. I can, but I can't believe that there's Chicago fans out there defending the fact that, Kyle Davidson had nothing to do with it. I don't care that he had nothing to do with it. This isn't about who had something to do with it, and it's a completely different regime now. They just, as far as I'm it was funny. I got criticized because the word I used was rewarded. Well, what do you call the best prospect that the league has seen since Connor McDavid?
Arizona got slammed 1,000 times harder for having a couple of skates. Now, and I know that the logic from the league was, well, that affected the draft. They were working out prospects, and that was draft, blah, 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 draft-related activity, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, factually speaking, the Arizona Coyotes got more for working some players out than the Chicago Blackhawks did for a coach abusing a player, your entire ownership management team finding out about it in the playoffs and actively deciding, no, we're going to cover it up because it would be a distraction to our Stanley Cup run. And they then buried it. They didn't bring it up after the season and go, okay, now we can address it. They buried it. And they hid it for a decade plus, until they were called out for it. Most of them lost their jobs in hockey. And the team was fined $2 million, and that's the end of that. You can't tell me that Rocky Wirtz didn't call Gary Bettman and say, how big of a check do I need to write you for this to go away? And Gary said, how's $2 million? And Rocky said, fine, here it is.
Well, especially when, like, I'm sorry, that's too easy to make back up like the way they just did.
Hello.
You know, you can make the money. It's not about that. But beside the point, like,
you're going to make 10x that in jersey sales this year alone.
I'm not going to harp on it forever, kind of thing. It is what it is at this point, because it's I don't want to call it a footnote because it's not something minor, but it's one of many things, and the list grows frequently.
That embarrass you about covering the NHL as a profession?
Well, I mean, not completely as a profession, but
okay, but you know what I mean.
Yes, I not that embarrass me about covering it. It's just because there's enough thing, like some of the things that some of the things that I can put on the list here, like of things that have been wrong with the game and things like that, don't have anything to do with anything that's really, I don't want to call it suspicious. It's just don't have anything to do with like off-ice scandal type stuff or anything like that. It's very quite clearly comes down to on-ice type things that you just need to show you care about more. And maybe the best way to show you care about it more is to, I don't know, maybe think about new leadership in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
I mean, and like, you know, again, conversations.
Are you talking about on ice stuff like your referees being caught on hot mics talking about looking for calls against teams? I'm
talking about what appears to be a clear-cut emphasis on calling a lot of penalties in this year's playoffs, so that the game flow is really not as good as it could be. The Department of Player Safety being the
only
usual
for the first four games. Only for the first 4 games of the series.
Well, fair enough.
In games 5, 6, and 7, penalties are drying up. Especially penalties that create a power play. Let me specify that. They'll call 2v2s 2-on-2s all day long.
Oh, I hear you.
But last night in Dallas-Seattle game 7, there was a penalty 7 minutes and 18 seconds. Eeli Tolvanen against Jamie Benn. Jamie Benn high sticking 15-20 against Morgan Geekie. Both penalties in the first period. That was it for that game. And that was not the last infraction committed in that game, just for the record.
No, I believe that. And I don't mind that if it's evened up kind of at the end of the night. I understand.
I agree.
I'm not trying, and there's an element of it where, like, yes, are officials going to see everything? No, they are not. There's an element where, like, I think a lot of people are at fault, if I'm being honest. Sure. And we're kind of getting off on a tangent, so I don't want to go too far with this, but
fair.
It's like a lot of people are at fault from all sides. Like, can the officials be way better? Yeah, they sure as hell can. Can the Department of Player Safety be better? Yeah, they sure as hell can. Should fans and, like, there's some stuff that we're looking at under a microscope, taking it down to the nanosecond to be able to see it, and you're looking at an official going, how come that didn't get called? Like, be realistic to an extent.
But then there's Nurse and Petrangelo, who got the same punishment.
That's player safety, though.
Right.
Which we've argued that for a long time.
Yep.
I'm not talking about penalty calls. I'm talking I'm talking about penalty calls.
Let's finish up with the draft lottery here real quick. We'll put a pin in this. I do want to come back to this when we talk about the playoffs. Right. Real quick. Do you think the Flyers stay at 7? Do you think there's a chance they move up, they move down? I would say it's more likely that the Flyers move up than down if they're going to be moving in the draft. That being said, I think it's pretty likely they just kind of pick at 7.
That's what I think, too, because I think that Danny Briere knows the importance of picking toward the top. Obviously, he didn't get the chance to kind of oversee the team for the whole year to see what kind of came of it or whatever, but I just don't. I mean, there's a compelling argument to go down because if you can get more capital, I mean, you've got a lot of things. A
lot of holes to fill. Yeah.
Well, and you have a lot, like, Danny Briere doesn't have an envious job here in the sense that, like, there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of screw ups that were made along the way in terms of having some picks available, especially in this year's draft. That being said, I mean, they're gonna have multiple first round picks next year, and they're going to probably have to continue down that path a little bit. I mean, Briere's got a lot of work to do, and everybody knows that. So
Yeah.
it's got to start somewhere. So let it start somewhere. You know what I mean? I mean, like, there's not much you can speculate on at this point. There will be, certainly as we get closer to the draft, there will be players to look at. You obviously can rule out the obvious at 7. It's not going to be Bedard and it's not going to be Fantilli. And you can probably safely also take away guys like Carlson and, Mishkov's interesting, so I don't want to speculate on anything there.
He's probably the most likely to slide, but I don't necessarily know if I want the Flyers to be taking a guy like that.
It's compelling argument for both sides. That's the thing. It's really compelling. I've seen a lot of, let me pull up a quick. I didn't really have a whole bunch of them.
The Ivan Fedotov situation kind of spooks me a little bit.
Yeah, I get that.
Like, especially with this organization, like, you never know. They might still be salty about the whole, Red Army game. Like, Russia's weird, man. Like, they might legitimately still hold some harbors towards this specific franchise for that game 40 years ago. That is a real possibility.
So anyway, I want to go through a couple names. I'm trying to kind of bridge the gap to get to 7 here. I think Will Smith, who's the center on the U.S. National Development Team, is
not that Will Smith.
Yeah, is probably the next it's those 4 guys we just mentioned, and then he's probably the 5th based on a lot of the lists I see.
Do you know how many bad Fresh Prince jokes are going to get made if he ends up here?
Oh, a ton. I know.
So many.
I mean, I see a lot of other names that kind of have popped up over the course of things. Ryan Leonard's also is a winger on that U.S. team. Oliver Moore is a center on the U.S. team. So they're guys whose name kind of float around that 7, 8 overall. Zach Benson, who a lot of people have some interest in. He's had a really good scoring year playing in the he was playing in the WHL. So you got all of that to look forward to. I mean, but those 3 names right off the bat that I just gave you, Leonard, Benson, and Moore, are probably 3 of the 5 targets that are going to be talked about a lot. Because if you can get past, once you get past the obvious that at least 3 of the first, maybe the first 3, in fairness, because of the whole thing with Mishkov, maybe the first 3 are going to quite literally be Bedard, Fantilli, Carlson. And then you've got
pretty likely.
And then you've got 3 more until the Flyers pick.
Yep.
And we'll see. We'll kind of see from there. I'm trying to see if there's any other right off the top of my head, if there's any other names that kind of stand out that I've seen kind of going their way. Maybe this Gabriel Perreault I saw a little bit of. He's also a U.S. prospect. I mean, you could feel pretty safe if you thought maybe they'll take an American there, because there's a lot of American kids in the top portion of this draft. Don't get me wrong. I
feel like there always is. The U.S. National Development Team just does such a great job.
Well, it's because it's picked up over the last several years too. You can't deny that. So.
Oh yeah.
And that's, again, these are discussions we'll have way, way, way closer to, closer to the draft.
Yeah, closer to the draft itself. We will.
But the idea is that there's names already floating out there that I'm sure people have seen by now, and we'll get into that more later.
Yeah. So, all right, we are moving over towards the playoffs here. Quick little break here in the middle, just to remind you to follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcasts. Okay. Second round. So.
Okay.
Second round, I was excited because coming in, the first round's a little overwhelming because there's 2 games in every time slot and they're overlapping and you're switching back and forth and you're basically watching hockey for 4 hours straight. Second round is when things settle down a little bit and you get an early game and you get a late game and there's not really crossover unless the early game goes to overtime. And then we had a couple of blowout series.
Yeah.
Do we want to get kind of the boring ones out of the way off the top?
Sure, whatever order you would like to go in. What do you want to do? Start with the East, I guess. Is that what you want to do?
Let's start in the Metro.
Which one do you want to do first? You want to start Metro? Okay, hang on. I'm going to rearrange these first, and then we'll do that. All right, so we'll do this first. So that's what you want to start with. Okay.
Because, God, this series sucked. It really did. Game 1, 5-1 Canes. Game 2, 6-1 Canes. Game 3, 8-4 Devils in the only entertaining game in the series. Game 4, 6-1 Canes. Game 5, 3-2 Canes in overtime.
So,
the second most entertaining game in the series, but it still kind of sucked.
I'm laughing because the first line of my notes is, this was an ugly series.
Dude, the series sucked. It was awful.
Yeah.
It was impressive, though, watching the Hurricanes score 3 shorthanded goals and lose Game 3.
Do you realize I found a stat? I wish I could remember where it was. I don't know if I bookmarked it. But it was like, I think it was like that this is the 4th time this has happened or something like that.
Really?
No. 4th time that a team has scored 3 shorthanded goals in a playoff game.
Oh, okay.
And it's the 3rd time that the team that scored the 3 has lost.
That's hilarious.
Like,
if you have 2 shorthanded goals, stop. Just dump and chase it.
Right. Crazy, right?
Insane.
But no, I mean, Carolina just imposed their will in this series. They games 1 and 2 were bloodbaths.
Yep.
And then the Devils do the same thing that they did against the Rangers and take game 3. It's kind of,
and you think it's turning.
Right. It's kind of convincing, and you start to think, oh, here they come again. Now we're going to see this kind of crazy series, whatever.
And then the game 4 Hurricanes showed up ready to win a Stanley Cup.
And game 4 is where you knew that Carolina was the more experienced team.
Well, because even that game, they come out, Jack Hughes scores 2 minutes in.
Right.
And then
even in the early stages of game 4, you're thinking it again, like, oh my goodness, are the Devils
in New Jersey, the Rock is hopping.
Yeah. You know what I come away from with this series?
Rod Brindamore came to play, baby. Okay, what did you come away with?
That this is a line I've used in playoff shows past. So I'm saying this again. This is not necessarily a prediction, so don't read into it completely. But doesn't this feel like it's a little bit their time? That the stars are aligning a little bit for Carolina this time around. They've had some shortcomings before, and usually at this point of the playoffs, it's like, oh, they can't really getting out of the second round is a challenge because they always seem to run into that buzzsaw team. Could be Boston, the Rangers last year.
They got Florida in front of them.
They only made the conference final. They only made the conference finals once in Rod Brindamore's first season as head coach. Otherwise, this is where the ride usually ends.
Yep.
I think you see Carolina now. By the way,
no Svechnikov, no Pacioretty. By the way,
no. Led in the series by Jordan Martinook, no less.
And that's
off the charts good.
And that's why this team is insane. You got goals in that game 4 dominant victory I was talking about. You got goals from Brett Pesce. Like, you got goals from Jordan Martinook. You got, like, Brett Pesce might have more goals in the playoffs than he had in the regular season. I love Brett Pesce. Brett Pesce is a defensive defenseman. Most of you don't even know who he is because Brett Pesce doesn't score points. I think he's got about 90 career points in 6 seasons.
I'm gonna need a quick minute to get this back up on my screen, but I looked at something yesterday that yes, you need to know.
Was it the Brett Pesce stats and the fact that he has probably has more goals?
No, I've got the stats for Carolina for the series, by the way, and I just want you to take okay. So Brett Pesce had 2 goals, 2 assists in the series for 4 points. I want you to tell me, who do you think that was more than?
Brett Burns.
Who had Brett Burns had 3.
Ha! Shane Gostisbehere.
3.
Brady Shea. No, Brady Shea had a pretty good series, didn't he?
Brady only had 1 goal, so you're right about that. But
did he lead the entire defensive core? Did Slavin have as many points as him?
Slavin had 4 points, but
God, I love the Carolina Hurricanes defense. My God.
Okay, but do you want me to read? You're missing 2 names that should be obvious, and this is what shocked me.
Okay.
Brett Pesce had more points in the series than Martin Nakash and Sebastian Aho. Both had 3.
Rod Brindamore is going to get a statue of him made for every corner of PNC Arena.
Can I tell you who the top 4 point guys in the series were?
Okay.
Or better yet, the only 4 players that were point per game in the series.
Okay, go for it.
I already mentioned Jordan Martinook.
Yeah,
Martinook had 3
hell
goals.
of a series.
Martinook had 3 goals.
Was Jesper Fast one of them?
Yes, he was.
He had a great series too.
Martinook had 3 goals and 7 assists for 10 points. He was He averaged 2 points per game in the series. Jesper Fast had 3 goals, 3 assists, so 6 points.
Yep.
Jordan Stahl had 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points. And the last one, Jesperi Kokaniemi, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. All before you get to, Brett Pesce at 4, Jacob Slavin at 4, and Seth Jarvis at 4. And I think Seth Jarvis is kind of crossing into that Nakash stratosphere a little bit. Like he's going to be a really good player for a long time.
The Carolina Hurricanes are doing this without Andrei Svechnikov and without Max Pacioretty. Holy smokes. Frederik Andersen has not been perfect.
No, but he had a really good series.
He had a good little bounce back series.
Particularly the 3 game, really all 4 wins, because it was 1 goal, 1 goal, 1 goal, and then 2, I think, right?
Yep.
Because that was a 3-2 final in overtime. That was the last result. So really, the only game that he gets, he gives you get on the hook for 8 goals, which he wasn't on the hook completely for, by the way, because he got pulled in the middle of that game.
Right.
But you have a game like that, and then 1-1-1 and 2. That's how you win.
You'll take that every day of the week. Yep.
Well, the goaltending and the thing is, the goaltending's good, but collectively, we've talked about this before. Collectively, they play a tight, checking, defensive game. They possess enough skill to know how to beat you. You can't take away and this was funny. I didn't actually get to this when we were talking Flyer stuff, but one of the things, because I said something about you need to know that today's game is speed and skill, right? Yep. And I get countered with, have you even watched the playoffs? Look at how Carolina and Florida are doing. It's is Sebastian Aho that guy though?
No.
Right.
And he doesn't need to be. They've built a team that it makes it so he doesn't need to be. Now, on the other hand, this other team we're about to, they do have a lot of their superstars tied up in their shenaniganery. The most important probably being Matthew Tkachuk. I am, of course, talking about the Florida Panthers. And if you're here, if you're listening to this show, you already know the Leafs lost. After 3 games, it was 3-0 Florida. And Toronto really looked shell-shocked. Kevin, are you surprised that Game 4 went Toronto's way? Because I kind of was.
Am I surprised that that it wasn't a sweep?
That they got any, yeah. Because after the first 3, boy, Toronto looked broken.
Do you want to know what my real answer is to that?
Okay.
I'm not surprised that they won Game 4. I'm surprised the way they won Game 4. Is that fair?
Fair enough.
If you would have told me that they win a 5-4 game in Game 4, I would have believed you. If you would have told me it was 2-1 with the way that everything else was going, I wouldn't have.
What if I told you the Leafs never scored more than 2 goals in that series? Would you have picked them to win?
No, obviously.
There you go. That team was not built to win 2-1 games. I know they won Game 5 2-1. That team was not built to win 2-0, 2-1 games. They just weren't. No. And the Florida Panthers did a great job of clogging the neutral zone and clogging the blue line and grinding it out.
Because the answer
getting dirty Florida, in the corners.
Yeah. Well, because the answer for Florida is this. They just kind of kept riding that wave because, again, it's very... I don't want to completely say it's carefree, but they are playing loose. You can't deny that.
They're playing with a team that has Sergei Bobrovsky behind them playing some of his best hockey. And when Sergei Bobrovsky is at the top of his game, when he is sane, because that's a relevant issue, he is one of the best goalies in the world. Right. And they are playing like a team that has one of the best goalies in the world behind them. Simple as that.
Can't disagree with it. I mean, look, it's
And will it stay that way? I don't know.
right. Well, and the thing about Toronto is when the scoring just dries up like it did.
It dried up bad.
I mean, I'm sorry. The reason why a lot of people and I want to make sure that I capture this as well because where did I put my stuff at here? Oh, because in fairness, I didn't write yours down, by the way. I forgot this. What did you have for the Carolina series, really quick?
I remember. I had Canes in 5.
Oh, you had Canes in 5. All right, and I had Canes in 6, which fair enough.
I actually feel pretty good about this. I called it pretty perfectly. The Devils came out and won Game 3 at home, kind of that traditional we're coming home game.
And that's fair.
And the Carolina Hurricanes just kind of said, well, sure, you got one, but we're the better team here.
Now, what did you have for the Toronto-Florida series?
I picked the Leafs, and I believe it was 6.
See, okay, and I had Toronto in 7, so look, I don't feel bad about Florida winning the series. I felt like there was some of that was going to carry over. Part of my reasoning, though, is because when you go through the last handful of games that Toronto had played to get to this point, and Austin Matthews is on if Austin Matthews is on a 4-game goal streak.
Yep, and Matthew
it's like it's all heating up at the right time. And oh, by the way, so how many goals did Austin Matthews score in this series? None.
Matthew Tkachuk and Alex Barkov did a fantastic job with the Toronto Maple Leafs top units.
So how many goals did Austin Matthews score? That would be 0. How many goals did John Tavares score? That would be 0.
0. Okay.
How many, and then Mitch Marner gives you 1 and is second on the team in points with 3 in the series. Nylander's the same, 2 goals, 3 points. And your top scorer in 5 games is Morgan Rielly with a goal and 4 points. That's not going to cut it. And
they are careening towards a tumultuous offseason.
Oh, sure. And the one thing I saw that I agree with, and it's kind of why you don't wait on things, like when we were talking about all the Flyer stuff, you don't wait on things per se, is I don't know, like, what more would you like Kyle Dubas to do? You go out and you get Ryan O'Reilly. You go out and you get Nola Chari. You get
Jake McCabe. You
pick back
Sam
up Luke
Lafferty.
Shen.
Yep.
You pick back up Luke Shen, who looked the part, right? Looks like he's a good fit.
The only thing you didn't do that you could theoretically criticize him for is he didn't shore up his goaltending. Samsonov was not bad.
Well, he got hurt halfway through too.
Right. And then Joseph Woll came in and looked great. Quite frankly, he's probably going to be your backup next year, minimum.
I can't tell you how bad I felt for him in that overtime because he's doing everything he can.
Yep.
And you can't let him wear the whole result. I mean, at the end of the day, and by the way, this is another part of the comment that I want to bring up, by the way, because the other part of the comment was, I suppose you want them to build like, because again, it was have you watched the playoffs with what Carolina and Florida doing? I suppose you want them to build like Toronto. No, I don't want my team to be built, or the team that I cover, or I would not build a team based on 3 players making
60% of your salary cap.
Right, 3 players making double-digit salary cap hits only to disappear in the playoffs. Do you know what that looks like, by the way? Because everybody should know what it looks like. It's the exact same criticism that everybody had of Claude Giroux for all those years. Where does it go? Right?
Yep.
Where did he go? All big regular season, the playoffs come, factored out. What happened? Right? Well, at what point in time do you start going, what happened, Austin Matthews? What happened, John Tavares? What happened, Mitch Marner?
For the record, Marner's kind of picked that reputation up already a little bit.
And Marner was, in fairness to Marner, I think Marner looked better than the other 2 did in those games. Like, at least looked like he had a pulse, and Nylander scored a key tying goal.
Nylander's not going anywhere. You can't trade him. Unless
I don't know if I'm not convinced.
The only way you're trading Nylander is if you're tearing it all down. Because
I think Nylander's the easiest one out of the group to move because I think it's harder to justify the other 3. You trade your captain, you trade your 60-goal scorer from a couple of years ago.
If you trade Nylander, you have to trade another one because you're not going to trade Nylander and get better for his money. You're just not.
And is it possible that the 2 that stay are Matthews and Tavares and it's Marner?
I think, and there's been a lot of talk about this.
And I wouldn't do that, by the way. I'm just saying, is it possible?
Matthews
Yes, it is, right?
Matthews is eligible to sign an extension July 1st. If you don't know by draft day that you got a pretty good shot at signing him,
yeah, you're in trouble then. I guess,
do you
right?
consider it?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean,
you call up old Danny Briere and say, "Hey, how's number 7 overall plus your first round pick next year sound for Austin Matthews?"
Which one? Which first rounder next year?
Yours.
Yeah, I know.
Although with Austin Matthews, I don't know.
Do you know the thing that actually worries me about Austin Matthews, and it's not like it's completely like it doesn't completely affect him, but he's had enough injuries around the hand.
It's starting to get
that it
nervous.
just feels like you know what it makes me wonder? It's not him on a team with guys like Tavares and Nylander and Marner. He'll be able to score on that team. So, I think that would be a potential fleecing for Toronto in the long run. If you send him to the Flyers, let's say, because you're trying to entice them with a superstar level player who may not, be the same level player when the contract is whatever contract he gets is up. You know what I mean? Like, it just is what it is. Anyway, like looking at Florida, on the other hand, though, like it's funny. You know who else didn't score a goal in the series that has been scoring a ton in the playoffs? Matthew Tkachuk didn't score, but he didn't have to score.
It doesn't matter. Yep.
And by the way, Florida. Okay, let's counter Florida the same way we countered Carolina, right? Because I look at Carolina, and you want to talk about playing playoff style hockey and having guys that play that style of game, and I'm not disagreeing with that at all. But I don't view Sebastian Aho that way. I don't view Nakash that way. I don't view Jarvis that way.
That's fair.
Like they've got other guys who I think know how to play from a skill standpoint. And when it comes to the Florida Panthers, I don't even have to think about it. I mean, look, Kachuk's got an edge to him, so I guess like he's one of the few that probably balances both sides of the scale really well.
The Florida Panthers have Radko Gudas driving screens on an overtime winner.
And I get that, but what I'm talking about is that like I don't view Alexander Barkov as that kind of player. I think he's just a good defensive player who can score.
Absolutely.
Fine. I don't view, you're going to tell me that Carter Verhaeghe's not speed and skill, that Barkov can't be speed and skill, that Sam Reinhart's not speed and skill? Like,
that's fair.
And that, which brings me to an interesting point, by the way, because I think that, and maybe this got overshadowed in the Boston series a little more than than what happens from here on out, because I think the Boston series was just so shocking.
I agree.
To receive the well, and especially when they're down 3-1 too. Like, let's be real, they're down 3-1. And you're immediately going to that. And I think it was the shock of, well, they came back against that team. That's a big surprise.
That's a confidence boost unlike any other.
Which it is. Sure. Then they do this to Toronto, though. And I think that now, I think people forgot how good they were a season ago. Like, that this team got straight up swept away by Tampa in the second round last year after winning the President's Trophy. It's not like it all disappeared. Now, look. Kachuk's a newcomer.
You did some pretty major roster surgery.
Right. Kachuk's a newcomer, but Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe, they stayed. They've gotten better. Brandon Montour completely filled whatever void we thought Mackenzie Weegar was going to leave behind. He's filled it. And then when you need it most, Sergei Bobrovsky morphed back into the Vezina guy.
Don't look now, but who's developing defensemen for the Florida Panthers? Because they're starting to churn out some talent.
Don't look now, but who's getting a lot of airtime when they win a game? Like, think about the brains behind some of this operation. This is Bill Zito as the general manager. Yep. Roberto Luongo has involvement with this team. Like, just think about the brains behind some of this operation. This is not the early 2000s Florida Panthers.
No, and they now find themselves in the conference finals.
It's awesome. I think I don't
absolutely.
think that's bad. Like, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, there's people who paint it as a bad thing, like that it's all Southern. Like,
it's pretty funny for the ratings market that you're telling me you got Raleigh, North Carolina versus Sunshine, Florida as your Eastern Conference final matchup.
But I'm gonna be curious to see if they can come out because there was a lot
Carolina
of stuff about
shows up.
Well, that's the thing that I like. That's kind of the argument that I want to make. I can understand some of the stuff with Florida, and don't get me wrong. I think the Florida crowds in the playoffs have been really good, but you can kind of play with the regular season and go, kind of where is everybody?
They were pretty blue crowds during the Toronto series, even with
It's not perfect. I'm agreeing with you. It's not perfect. I'm just like I'm saying. The way that crowd reacted during Game 6 against Boston, and again, heavy contingent of Boston fans making it down there.
Oh yeah,
it still was a good crowd for for more than just your typical like handful of fans, visiting fans made it in the building for the playoff game, right?
Yeah, but Raleigh, honestly. So remember a couple years ago when Nashville made their cup run and their fan base got a really big like national boost?
Yep.
Carolina's due for something like that. They don't do the fun chant thing.
Well, they got the storm surge, though.
But you know what I mean. Everybody loved Nashville's post-goal celebration that year, and it was fun. It was fun, don't get me wrong.
Oh, I hear you.
But Carolina is due for a similar breakout on the national stage, and I do really think this is going to be good for them.
So we're going back to the text conversation then that we had a little while ago, because I believe that this is no longer that type of market. Look, they're always going to be categorized as small market because population wise,
Raleigh, North Carolina is not a large town.
Right. It's just Raleigh, North Carolina is not New York. It's not LA. It's not Philly. It's not Boston. It's not Detroit. It's not any of those.
It's not even Charlotte in the state of North Carolina.
And fair enough.
Right.
Here are the things that I think make it different. First of all, I think you got to give a ton of credit to Rod Brind'Amour, because I think Rod Brind'Amour, let's just say Brind'Amour as a captain of that team helped get them on the map a little bit in the mid 2000s to begin with.
Rod Brind'Amour has to be the single biggest figure in Carolina Hurricanes history in terms of on ice representation.
I want you to tell me how he's supposed to be anywhere else in this league going forward.
I told you he's going to have statues of him in every corner of PNC
how
Arena.
Can you picture like everybody's shelf life usually dries up after a while? How can he go anywhere else, especially if he wins another cup as a coach this time?
He's going to be David Poile. He's going to be there for 25 years. He'll be the GM eventually, and then he'll retire and just play golf in North Carolina.
I don't even think he'll be the GM.
I don't think he has any desire to be the GM. That's fair.
I think he just goes to president.
You know what? I think
people.
He'll talk to Jonesy for about 6 months. Jonesy will call him and go, "Hey, this president of hockey ops thing is pretty sweet." And Brindy will go, "Yeah, you're right. Okay, that sounds good. I'll do that one day too."
I'm not going to go as far as to say 6 months, because I think that dude's got the hunger in him still to win more than.
No, I'm not saying he makes the move in 6 months. I'm saying they have the conversation in 6 months.
Maybe, I don't know.
All right, do we want to talk about the Eastern Conference Final now?
We can table it a little bit, but I want to finish the Carolina thing really quick. Because Brind'Amour is a big part of why I think that they've emerged out of that. I think that you take that, you add in the fact that they've had a couple of since Brind'Amour took over, they've made the playoffs every year. They've won rounds, I think, every year except for the bubble year. That's the only year that they didn't make it out of the first round of the playoffs. So that gives you a bunch of second round series. Now 2 conference finals, because this will be their second under Brind'Amour.
Yep.
And and on top of that, getting an outdoor game this past season, these are steps that are taken. Think about it. Nashville, let's use Nashville as an example. They made a cup final. Now all of a sudden it's everybody get to your TVs when Nashville's on in the playoffs because the crowd's insane. And then it's a few years down the line, they get an outdoor game too.
Yep.
Right? Because why not? It's growing. Why do you think and it's not even going to be, I believe, right? It's not even going to be in Vegas, but Vegas is getting an outdoor game next year. Why do you think that is? Because it's working. The league makes plenty of mistakes. And believe me, there's been plenty of reasons. Again, we're back on this a little bit. And this is a fair time to bring it up to an extent because it's all encompassing playoff talk. I've seen a lot of best sport, worst league comments all playoff long. And it's fair. It's warranted.
Yeah.
It deserves criticism. But one of the things I think that they've done right, especially under Gary Bettman, that has worked is you've seen, and this is going to be a really good segue into the 2 West series because I think this is relevant. They've been able to expand fairly well. And look, Atlanta aside, I get Atlanta has consistently thrown away the opportunity to have a hockey team.
Yep.
But it's working. Like, okay, shocker, it's not like exactly a surprise that it's going to work in Minnesota and it's going to work in Winnipeg. I get that. But it's worked in Nashville, it's worked in Columbus, it's worked in Vegas, and it's worked in Seattle.
Fair enough.
So you've got multiple examples of franchises in cities where you maybe thought, how is this going to be possible? How is this going to work? And it's standing the test of time. These are franchises that we will continue. I mean, how do you go wrong with a franchise like Vegas? Let's segue into their series now, I suppose. How do you go wrong with a franchise like Vegas making it to their 4th conference final in 6 seasons? How do you go wrong with that?
The Vegas Golden Knights, it's insane. We looked at that. I remember looking at the original roster in 2017, 2018, whatever year it was, looking at the original roster and going, man, if this team wins 35 games, it'll be an accomplishment. And then they went into the playoffs and almost won 16. They won like 14 games in the playoffs alone.
They won 13, actually.
13, okay,
it
I'm
was
sorry.
4-1 in the cup final. But
I thought it was game 6. Okay, fair enough.
No, game 5 is what it was. But let's not
because they had home ice. Okay.
But let's not forget that they were very much in that game. I mean, like,
oh yeah.
As a matter of fact, I now you're going back to the Holtby save and all that stuff. Like, I mean, there was a couple of games where one thing, one way or the other, and they could have been on the cusp of winning a cup.
Yeah.
So, like,
and we sit here, all these years later, and something that you and I actually were joking about before the show, almost no original members. Like, they have essentially flipped over almost the entire roster, except for that one line from that original season, Carlson, Marcius, O'Reilly, Smith. And
yeah, well, I'm at
and there are a couple more familiar, we
talked
about it
get
before.
Up the stats from their series, just to point out that, 2 out of the all 3 of them had contributions, but 2 out of the 3 in particular did a lot of things in 6 games.
Yeah. So in the first round, by the way, I think this was the most high-octane series. This was the most blink and you'll miss it, you can't look away, anything can happen series.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, that I've seen in a long time. Like, this felt a lot like Pittsburgh Flyers 2012. Like, just that high-scoring, anything can happen.
The only downside is that it was a little too one-sided scoring in most of the games.
Yeah.
Like you had a really good competitive game 1. It's a 6-4 final. That's that high intensity. I get it, 1,000%. And then you get 5-1, 5-1, 4-1, and you blinked, and it's tied 2-2 in the series, because after that Vegas win in game 1 that was really close, you got 2 Edmonton blowouts and a Vegas blowout in the middle of it. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, this series felt a lot like the team spent the first 4 games each taking their pound of flesh from each other, and then 5 and 6 were when they were going to decide it. And then
I think the series turned in game 5, to be honest.
Yep, and we get to 5 and 6, and Vegas just kind of turns the screws, and the stars come out a little bit. And honestly,
I think
they did a great job. I know Connor McDavid is still leading the playoffs in points and still had, I think, 3 points in game 5.
Yeah.
But they did a great job containing him, all things considered.
Yeah, well, so here's the thing too, because this is where the series changes for me, because it happened twice in the last 2 games.
Okay.
Both games, Edmonton's the team that comes away with an edge at some point, right?
Yep.
Like game 5, Edmonton has the edge, and then bang, 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 3 goals very quick, and
3
just
goals
like
in
that,
a
you
minute
look
and a
up,
half.
right? And you look up, and it's 4-2 Vegas, and the Oilers get one of them back in the 3rd period, and it's a great. I just saw it again today. It's a great goal by McDavid. I'm not taking anything away from him, but they just can't complete that comeback. And then in game 6 again, Vegas was on the board in seconds, and then Edmonton was on the board in seconds, and then Edmonton scores again, and we're not even 2.5 minutes into the game, and it's 2-1.
That game felt like an 8-7 game. It just felt like it, and ended up not being that. But in the second period, Jonathan Marchessault just took over.
Well, and that's the thing. Edmonton gets that 2-1 lead, and this holds for a while. Like, this is early first period, and you play an entire period worth of hockey, and nothing else has changed yet. It's still 2-1. And then Jonathan Marchessault. takes over, natural hat trick in the second period alone.
By the way,
and
the three goal scorers in Game 6. Riley Smith opened it. Jonathan Marchessault got the natural hat trick in the second period. William Karlsson got the empty net.
Sometimes
Come on, baby.
All comes back.
Come on, baby. The script writers are getting lazy.
But it's very much, and we just had this argument with the Toronto series a little bit because it happened again. McDavid gets his points and Draisaitl got his. And as a result, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is getting points and Zach Hyman's getting points and Evan Bouchard's getting points. And that group of five is on the ice for power plays and contributing. But the supporting cast dries up. Where were all of the players that we talked about in the first round? Where was Klim Kostin? Where was Nick Bjugstad? Where's Kyler Yamamoto? Where was Evander Kane?
Yep.
You lose some of those players and all in that contributing fashion. And you can't just expect McDavid, Draisaitl to do it all in their own. And I think Draisaitl took a hit the slash that should have warranted more.
I do want to jump into that. Yeah. Yeah, I do actually want to touch on that. So game 4, I mentioned that the first 4 games of this series were the teams kind of taking their pound of flesh from each other. That reached its pinnacle towards the end of game 4.
When it was clearly out of hand, by the way.
Game 4 was really, really nasty. It got nasty in the first period, and it stayed that way the entire game. There was a lot of dirty stuff going on. Both sides, it's deep in a playoff series. It's going to happen. The most egregious incident, and I think it's pretty well clear given the fact that he was suspended for it. Alex Pietrangelo comes down and full blown
2-hand chops.
It's the Adam Banks chop.
Yeah, it kind of is.
It's the Iceland chop across Banks' wrist. It full blown is. It's the same exact Pietrangelo's might have been worse, frankly. He just 2-hand over the top. Great sword, just tries to put it directly through his arm.
You mean to tell me a guy in his 30s with that weighs 220 pounds or whatever Pietrangelo weighs?
I just mean I think he swung it farther.
Well, I hear you, but I'm saying you mean to tell me that there was probably more force behind that than a movie that involves teenagers?
Well, the Iceland guy just kind of lifted it up like a high stick and then chopped it down. Pietrangelo came all the way over the head.
Yeah.
And he brought it down hard on Draisaitl's wrist. Thank God it hit the pad or something because he seemed to be relatively okay, if pretty annoyed. And that really got out of hand at that point.
Sure.
In the immediate aftermath, Darnell Nurse starts a fight, which in the last 5 minutes, he is also given an instigator for that, which in the last 5 minutes. That's where it
comes in, yes.
Right, which in the last 5 minutes is an automatic 1-game suspension. Now, that can be rescinded. You can appeal it, and it can be rescinded, and I assume the Oilers did, and it was not.
Right.
The issue from my end, however, is the fact that Alex Pietrangelo was only given 1 game. When Darnell Nurse is getting the 1 game. Now, if you decide to rescind Nurse's, I think I'm okay leaving Pietrangelo at 1 game, all things considered.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I think it's okay if it's 1.
But if you're going to uphold Nurse's, and that's fine. And if you want to uphold Nurse's, that is also fine. He did a thing that you're not allowed to do. I say it all the time, call the rule book. That's the rule book. He gets a game. I'm fine with that. Pietrangelo has to get more. Hello?
Right.
We're not even talking about comparing incidents from this game and context and this and that. They were right there. They happened right next to each other. This is worse than that.
I think the right call then was I think that in hindsight then, if you want to go with what the right thing to do would have been, I think Pietrangelo getting a game is fine. And they needed to take away.
Then you need to rescind Nurse's.
Well, no, but I'll give you the full reason why. If the freaking captain of the team, who Nurse fought against, tells you that the other party, which was Nick Hague, by the way, was a willing participant. The other captain did. This isn't it's not like McDavid said, I don't know what they're doing.
For the record, Connor McDavid immediately jumped Alex Pietrangelo. He immediately started trying to fight Alex Petrangelo. That's how blatant that was.
And in fairness, attempted to until probably as he got into it, realized, oh my goodness, don't get yourself hurt in the process.
Correct.
Like that's, you don't want that to happen. I understand why he's doing it, of course. In the moment, you don't.
Connor McDavid handled that fantastically.
Yeah,
I was not right.
He did fine. I just think, like, we're not talking about Connor McDavid saying to the media afterwards, well, they can't, like, if they're going to suspend him, they shouldn't uphold it because the other side was willing and ready to go, right?
Right.
No, the captain of the guy's own team is telling you he accepted the fight before the face-off even happened.
Yep.
This was mutually agreed upon. It, like, basically, it shouldn't be a suspension.
Right.
Like, he didn't say those exact words, obviously, but he gave you enough information that you should be able to take it into account and say, this is not an instigation penalty. We're going to rescind that.
Best game, worst league.
Exactly. Because it doesn't line up. It doesn't make any sense. And
that might be the episode title. It's one of those.
No, I think the episode title is still going to probably gear on.
That's fair.
Although we have in the past used Keeping Up with the Joneses, so we can't use that one again. I kind of wish we didn't waste that one on Martin Jones. Speaking of Martin Jones, you want to bounce it? Well, hold on. I want to make one more point on Vegas, and then we'll go to the Seattle and Dallas series.
Vegas looks great.
Well, because they continue to show that they've got depth. That's the point. Like,
they have depth at goaltending. Who has depth at goaltending?
Change.
They haven't even had to play Jonathan Quick yet.
Haven't had to play Jonathan Quick.
Aiden Hill's been great.
Laurent Brossoit gets hurt in the middle of the series. Looks like he's done for the playoffs the way that it's shaping up to be. I mean, it looked bad, which is a bummer because he was playing outstanding leading up to. But then Aiden Hill comes in, and I'm not going to lie to you. He comes in, and you're starting to think, oh dear God, now the backup to it feels like the backup to the backup, which is actually the truth. I mean, it really is the truth, is it not? Because it's like,
no, he's the third stringer there.
Right. Because in a perfect world, it's Logan Thompson, Laurent Brossoit, Aiden Hill. I mean, you got Jonathan Quick, obviously, like we've mentioned, and you can slot him in whatever position you would like to. But it was Logan Thompson for a majority of the year, and now it's been.
Remember Robin Lehner?
Yeah, I know, right?
Insane.
And I'm not going to lie to you. I saw that Aiden Hill was going in, and I thought, oh boy, McDavid's about to have a field day.
Me too. And
it's not like he didn't score on him, but he's the only one who scored on him. And that's it. That makes a difference. So, anyway, back to the part where they make their fourth conference final in 6 seasons. That's just remarkable. Isn't it?
Insane. They've really done a great job of just continuing to be excellent.
Consider the fact that it's already an accomplishment in and of itself to do that at any point in your franchise's history. 4 years in the this
4 and 6.
This is what we talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning like. Oh, look, you made it 4 times in 6 years and 3 Stanley Cup Finals in a row. That's amazing, right? This is the first 6 years the franchise has even been in existence. They missed the playoffs last year.
Yeah, and we were all stunned by it.
Yes.
And they
made a coaching change.
They are an honest to goodness juggernaut. And you know what? If they had lost this series, they might have made another coaching change.
And you know what? Good for Bruce Cassidy, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Were we or were we not talking about this, at least this being part of a coaching matchup somewhere down the line? We've already, there's pretty clear-cut not an ideal, but there's like a dream coaching matchup that could happen in the Stanley Cup Final if 2 teams in particular make it.
I don't know. We do have a pretty good one in the East that we'll talk about in a second. The coaching matchup is great. One more matchup out west here, and I know I said that Edmonton Vegas was probably the most fun, and I agree.
Yeah, by the way, who'd you have in the who did you end up having in Vegas?
I had Edmonton in, I think it was 6 or 7, so I definitely had a longer series.
I had Edmonton in 7, and obviously I'll take the L there.
Yeah, we both did. In this series, though, I was correct.
Same here.
Did indeed have the Dallas Stars beating the Seattle Kraken. I don't think I had 7. I think I had 5 or 6.
I think we were in agreement. I think we both had 6 because I had 6.
I thought the Dallas Stars were going to win it in 6. To be honest with you, they're sitting here after Game 5, up 3-2.
Yeah.
Man, you mentioned earlier that for the Carolina Hurricanes, the Stars were starting to come out, and you were starting to get some high-end scoring, and obviously not so much in this particular series. But man, the Dallas Stars. Stars.
Isn't this a fun team? This might be and I'm not trying to spoil anything here, and I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to play favorites or whatever, but this might be my favorite team left in the playoffs.
Hey,
The way
Kevin.
they are, they're my favorite. Like it's my like I'm trying to explain this the right way. It's my favorite, my favorite method of being built. Like I love the way this team is built, and I've said that multiple times before.
They've done
I
an
love the
incredible
way
job.
this team is built.
Yep.
I mean,
the fact that they're still getting meaningful contributions from Ben and Sagan while seamlessly bringing in your, Delandrias and Heiskanens and Robertsons and
Delandria doesn't even play every game. That's the thing.
I know he doesn't.
Even have
I
to
know.
play all of them.
And
No, I think you already said the name that I know.
I didn't even mention Joe Pavelski.
No, but you said the young name that I think we want to get to, which is
I did, and I'm going to get into it this particular way. So, Kevin, if you were on the voting committee and you were casting a Conn Smythe vote right now with the teams that we know moving forward, obviously you're not going to pick Connor McDavid. They're eliminated.
That wasn't the name that I was going to bring up, but I know what name you want.
But who would you probably vote for? Because I know who I would vote for. You can vote for whoever you want. Miro Heiskanen's a good option. Jake Ottinger's a solid option. There's a couple players in the Carolina series that I could make a run for. But I think there's a name that we all know, and if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you might have an idea of who I'm thinking of. Hey, Kevin, who would you vote for Conn Smythe at the moment?
Now, my method to this, which is I go by, and it's funny, around this time I start thinking about who's left and who on those teams would be there. And to be honest with you,
it's time to start looking. Yeah.
There's a couple of teams that still are left that we can get into that I think it's hard to make a decision. I think the team we just talked about has a tough time. Who do you pick for Vegas?
It might be Pietrangelo for only getting one game.
No, I think there's actually another answer that I would go with. Well,
Fair.
there's two. I think there's two that are tied.
Eichel's been great.
Eichel's one of them, but
Eichel's been great.
But I think you got to give a little consideration to Mark Stone because of what it's meant for him to come back at this time.
I agree.
And then because Carolina is the other tough one, by the way. Because I don't think without a shadow of a doubt, I think who number one is on Florida right now. It's got to be Bobrovsky.
I agree. Absolutely.
It's got to be. I mean, Kachuk would probably be second, but it's got to be Bobrovsky.
Is it Jacob Slavin in Carolina?
No, I'm still leaning Aho there probably. But
honestly, I think Carolina is still the most wide open race.
Not only do I think
as far as on an individual team level,
not only do I think it's such a wide open race, but I would venture on the side of that if Carolina were to win the Stanley Cup, based on the way things have gone so far. I mean, if somebody emerges in this series, then we could change our minds completely, right? But in the first two rounds, do you know who the MVPs of the playoffs are for that team? It's Rod Brindamore and Don Waddell. They're
not eligible to win the Conn Smythe.
It's the coach of the team and the people who built the team. Seriously.
So what you're predicting
I almost would venture on the side of if Carolina won the Stanley Cup today, based on the two rounds so far, that
Carolina beats
the losing team could win the Conn Smythe.
I was about to say Carolina beats the Dallas Stars in 7 1-0 games, and Jake Ottinger wins the Conn Smythe.
I mean, so I have I know what name you want me to say, and I'm going to say his name. So give me a second. I actually think because you brought up Ottinger. I think Ottinger's actually fallen out of the running a little bit because
for now, yeah,
he got pulled a little too much in that series for me.
But a game 7 performance like he had, if he has one more good game 6 or 7 performance, he's right back in it.
Well, I think let's put it this way. We're not gonna we won't be able to have that discussion. He's gonna have to be that level good for them to make it to the next.
You're probably right.
You might be able to get away with that against Seattle for a couple of games. I don't think you can get away with it against Vegas. I do think that Miro Heiskanen deserves a lot of talk. I mean, did you see the numbers, by the way? He played something like 11 and a half minutes in the third period yesterday.
As somebody who's had him in Sim League for a very long time, that kid plays a ton. He
had over 30 minutes. He played
every night. He plays a half hour every night.
He played 32 minutes last night, and in the 32 out of that 32, I think 11 and a half were third period.
He is everything.
Insane.
He's everything that we thought Ivan Provorov was 4 years ago.
Well, look at where he went in the draft, though. I mean,
I know.
I'm
I'm not complaining about Ivan Provorov. I'm just saying all the things that we sat here on this show 2, 3, 4 years ago and said about Ivan Provorov.
Do you know what? All
of those are applicable about Miro Heiskanen.
Do you know what I will complain about though?
Okay.
I don't like that this guy, but like maybe now he will a little bit. I don't like that this guy doesn't feel like he gets the due he deserves lined up next to Cale Makar. Like
He doesn't, though.
Like everybody focuses on Makar because Makar is both. He like the speed he has makes him back check better, and he can defend well, and he can create offense from defense, and he's a really good offensive player.
So can Miro Heiskanen, man.
No, but Heiskanen doesn't have the goal scoring numbers. He's only got 44 career goals and 204 career points in 300. Like you see the numbers that Makar puts up, and you're sitting there looking at the end of the day, and you're going, like, look at the regular
Where is
season.
that?
No, you're looking at the regular season career numbers, and okay, fine. This season, Heiskanen had 11 goals and 73 points, 62 assists, and you're like, okay, there it is. But before that, his highest point total was 36, and his highest goal total was 12 one year. Like, I think people get fixated on the offensive numbers and don't realize that in the course of that, and I can't look up exactly what all, like I'd have to go to, I'm on NHL.com, not on Hockey Reference at this very given moment, but he only played, and he got hurt in this game a little bit. That's why it happened this way. He only played 11 minutes and 12 seconds in this would be game 3 of the series, because he had to leave the game early and didn't come back right away.
By the way, has come back with the full bubble on and just an ugly hole in his face.
Right. And oh, by the way, so after that, these are the ice times for games 4 through 7 in this order.
Mm-hmm.
So game 4, 31:02, 25:59, 28:57, 32:07.
Wait, what game was 25:59?
5.
That was game 5. Was that the game they were up big?
No,
yeah, it sure was. They were up. Oh no.
Oh yeah, it was. No, yes, it was. Sorry.
Yeah, they were up 3-2 in the third period. Hintz scored about halfway through the third period. I guarantee you he didn't play a whole lot down the stretch there.
Probably not.
Guarantee you that's where most of those minutes went.
Well, and you had game 1, which went to overtime, where he probably only crosses over the half hour because of overtime, but 34:54. And then 20. Game 2, 28:51. Like. You're right. Like, a game that gets out of hand, he gets pulled back and plays 25 minutes, not 28. But the rest of them, he plays 28.
Yep.
28 to 30 something. But I know who you want me to say. I know what name you want me to say for, like, the Conn Smythe, and I agree with you. It's got to be Rope Hintz.
It's Rope Hintz. He has had such a good series. Come on now.
It was not quite the series that, like, the first round, where he led the league in scoring after the first round.
But you know what?
McDavid.
But you know what? With the fact that 3 of the top 4 aren't going to be getting any more points this postseason,
I know
he's gonna move up and clear some space in a hurry.
So I guess now I can what's it called? I can take off the date range of just the second round here and find everybody.
Yeah.
And find that Rope Hintz is 1 point behind Connor McDavid with an extra game. But that's about it. Like,
and Connor's not going to play anymore.
The only player who can come, I don't want to say can come close, but to an extent,
in the range. Right.
I mean, Matthew Tkachuk's got 16 points and Hintz has got 19. Tkachuk could certainly, I mean, you got to remember something too. Tkachuk had 11 points in the 7-game series against Boston.
Yep.
And then had 5 against Toronto.
And now has to go up against Carolina, who is not worse than Toronto defensively.
No, but I almost wonder if that brings it out more. Like,
maybe.
Well,
and he's probably going to be focused a little less on being a Tkachuk in the third round, because Carolina just doesn't really play that game, not as much as Toronto does.
Right.
Matthew Tkachuk ran a field day through Toronto, because Toronto is, quite frankly, mentally soft.
But, but like, this was a weird series too, because game 1 was spectacular. Pavelski gets the 4 goals in game 1 to tie it up, and, ties the game up. Seattle had 4 goals in the first period, which was crazy. It goes to overtime. And again, Seattle wins in game 1. And you're like, you know what? Like right there, I knew he had a series.
They can't keep getting away with it.
Yeah, but it was the same feeling I had when they played Colorado. You win 1, especially the first one, and I'm like, all right, you're here to play. It's going to be interesting. And then from there, I mean, the next few games just, a 4-2 game in game 2 isn't bad, but like 7-2, 6-3,
Pendulum
5-2,
swung heavy in this
6-3
game.
again. It was like, it was pretty obvious early on in a lot of these games which team was winning the game. It definitely wasn't a series for goaltending in those middle games. I mean, Grubauer's getting pulled, Ottinger's getting pulled.
Neither goalie looked
rough.
Great.
And then game 7 was everything that you want it to be. Like,
it was
tense.
A great game 7.
You know that the first goal is going to be crucial, and who else but Rope Hintz? Well, I mean, it's an awful play at your own blue line to turn the puck over there, and you give it to the work.
A creatively excellent offensive play.
Well, it's a good takeaway. I will give you that.
I know.
And it's a giveaway takeaway to the wrong guy.
He took an opportunity and ran with it.
I mean, if we're going off of at the time, you're going off of at the time a guy with 8 goals in the playoffs to this point who goes in and scores his 9th. You know, like the wrong guy to hand it to. And this was an interesting game to follow because as much as that goal puts Dallas ahead, it gives them the edge. It's 1-0 going to the third period. They didn't score again to make it 2-0 until there was 7:12 remaining. With 10 minutes left in the third period, I firmly believed that if this thing stayed at 1-0 and Seattle got the game tied, that they were winning in overtime.
Well, man, you want to go one better? So after Seattle scores this, or after Dallas scores the second goal, they're up 2-0. Mm-hmm. With about 3 minutes left. Mm-hmm. I think somebody called the timeout. I don't know who it was.
Seattle. Because Dallas called the timeout in the final 10 seconds.
Okay. And they started playing Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer. We're halfway there. Whoa, we're living on a prayer. Yeah. And I went, whoa. There's a lot of time left in this game. It's a 2-0 game. If it was 4-0 or 5-0, go for it. We're having fun. 2-0, that's a little bold, American Airlines Arena. And then Seattle scored with, what was it, about 20 seconds left? 30 seconds left?
Yeah, 17 seconds
17,
left.
Okay. And at that point, you're nervous, but you're still feeling okay. But I guarantee you that guy who made the decision to play that Bon Jovi went, oh, boy. Okay.
I'm trying to scroll backwards a little bit because I gotta find something that I sent to a buddy of mine during the Boston, Florida series that you're gonna need to see for bringing that up because it was just too funny. Or it's too funny to not include in this anyway. I gotta hope I can find it really quick because it's just because it was hysterical.
But yeah, while you're looking for that, this Stars team has really found a way to get scoring from everywhere, and their top horses are doing a good job of carrying the load and kind of producing in the clutch moments. You know, we talk about Rope Hintz scoring that big goal in Game 7. But they are also getting some depth scoring, and it's a really nice blend, and Dallas is really kind of clicking. If Jake Ottinger, sorts himself out and starts playing like Jake Ottinger in the playoffs last year, they're going to be a tough team to beat. They're going to be a tough out for Vegas.
Oh yeah, no question about it. And I like one of the things that I immediately think of here, and you're semi referring to the second goal there and who scores that, because again, here's a rookie who, has really emerged and put himself on the map as part of this team's future. I love what Wyatt Johnston brings to this team.
That kid has just scored clutch goal after clutch goal, and honestly, if he scores an overtime winner in the next round, he puts himself in that Conn Smythe conversation because he's clutch. It's not about how many, when.
I just can't wait to see what he does from here in his career, because you're talking the kid turned 20 a couple of days ago. He just turned 20, and we're just scratching the surface on his NHL career, and he's been outstanding. I found what I was looking for, so I'm going to text it over to you. Because it's too funny not to, because this is a buddy of mine during the Boston series. But either way, just in general with the series, like, they do have good depth. And again, like, I want to bring up the way that they are built, which is just this concept of keeping the old core that they didn't have to keep from, they didn't have to keep. I know you're laughing at this because
Dunking on Boston fans is great. Okay.
I have a little bit more leeway with this one. I'm not doing complete strangers.
Yeah, go for it.
But they had every ability to move on from Ben and Sagan a while ago if they wanted to, right? Like, you can make that call and pivot in your franchise and go looking for the new core. You could even do it after you get parts of the new core, after you get Heiskanen, after you get Ottinger, after you draft and find out what kind of player Jason Robertson is. It's only after the fact, it's only the fact that they've kept them around that makes it better. That they've found these other finds. I mean, your boy over there, Rope Hintz, is a second-round pick that turned into a key player, obviously.
Yep.
It's also timing, though, too. It's timing of trades. It's going out and trading to get Joe Pavelski when they did. Going and adding, this year in particular,
Man, Joe Pavelski's been so good for them.
This year in particular, adding Dodonov and adding Max Domi.
Yep.
You just did that now, and that gave you something different, too. You know what I mean?
Adding Dodonov back? Wasn't he there earlier?
Are you thinking of Guryanov?
No, I thought Dodonov was there before, but either way.
He was in Vegas for a little while.
I might be thinking of his original run in the NHL, but regardless.
Potentially, either way.
Either way, they come out of the Central Division here, and the Stars are a really fun team. And they've gotten it from everywhere. They've gotten it from the front end. They've gotten it from the back end. On the back end, we're still, we haven't really talked about the fact that Miro Heiskanen is also fantastic defensively. And also you got your Roddick Faxes back there and Esa Lindell and
and Fax is a forward.
I'm sorry, right. But he's been so defensively responsible in the bottom six, he might as well be a defenseman.
But it's all over the place. It's like you said, it's Esa Lindell. They've got a whole list of players.
Thomas Harley has been fantastic.
Well, exactly. I was about to go there. It's kind of unsung heroes, right?
We talk about transitioning and building on the fly. Wyatt Johnston and Thomas Harley? Come on, man. Come on.
And that's the thing. These aren't attractive names. I think Johnston.
Thomas Harley was in his draft year.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying to come up. I'm saying when you look at the roster, he's not the first guy you think of.
No,
not even close. But that's exactly who stepped up.
Yep.
And it even goes down to it's guys who haven't played in every game in the series, or in the playoffs. Between Hakanpää, Hanley, Miller, they got this whole list. Kiwi Rance is up front, and that's another guy up front.
Yeah.
But you want to add a defenseman to the mix that I think is oft forgotten in this group. Who again, much like Joe Pavelski, kind of falls in line. How about Ryan Suter?
Yep.
Revival, right?
Yep. Absolutely. He was left for dead when he left Minnesota.
Yep. And how about that revival?
And he comes and just slots into a very good team, and turns out that's a good thing.
And a forward that I don't want to gloss over in the middle of all of this, by the way, because we've mentioned, I think, just about every other name that's right up at the top here, kind of. Mason Marchment's been really good in this series.
Wow, you didn't even mention the name I thought you were going to mention. Tyler Seguin is also
no. Because I said Seguin in Ben in the core thing. So I did mention him. I'm not taking away. That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to keep in mind, throw in Mason Marchment too, because he's been really good. I mean, Mason Marchment's among in goal scoring anyway. He's pretty much one of the top 5 guys in scoring goal wise for the team.
As Jason Kelsey would say, it's the whole team.
It really is with them, though, isn't it?
It really is. Honestly, okay. Conference finals.
Yes, we're into the conference finals.
Dallas against Vegas. Let's stay here. Let's stay in the West. Dallas, Vegas. We just talked about the Dallas Stars. We broke down the Golden Knights right before them. Vegas will have home ice in this series. Games 1, 2, and then 5 and 7 if necessary will be in Vegas. Kevin, who you got?
I'm going to take. This is a tough call. I feel a little weird. I don't have it going 7. It feels like it should go 7, to be honest. I don't have it going 7 for a reason, because I think that the team that's going to win is going to win on home ice. So I'm picking Dallas.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I have a very strange feeling that this series is actually going to end with the road team winning.
I mean, that's been a trend in the playoffs. Don't get me wrong.
And
the
I
whole
have
playoffs.
And I have the Dallas Stars in 7.
Okay.
I have them coming into the Fortress, Game 7 conference finals, and Jake Ottinger, 60 save double overtime.
Ooh. I will say, by the way, I do have to add in there that did that not feel like that Game 7 against Seattle? Did that not
felt
feel
like it was
like
going to overtime?
No, did it not feel like exercising some demons from the Game 7 a year ago, where it's like, this is Jake Ottinger, the way that he's played all year, and he just knew, like, he had the big game when he needed to have the big game.
Do you think maybe not now, but in a couple weeks after the season's over, do you think he's going to be annoyed about that that goal with 17 seconds left?
Probably
could have been
not.
a shutout.
I mean, probably not either way, especially if he's playing in a Stanley Cup final potentially. But like,
that's fair. Or celebrating a Stanley Cup victory.
Right. But the interesting part is that's actually probably my biggest key to the series. With Vegas has been able to, maybe, I'm going to say no pun kind of intended here, but Vegas has kind of been a magic act with the goaltending in the playoffs, where it's just like anybody they throw in there has been able to be great. And I'm not trying to take away from what Aiden Hill just did in the last couple of games to get them there. But I just wonder if, first of all, what happens if something happens to him, and then what's the next step? Then you go to Jonathan Quick, who's been sitting on the bench for 3 series. Like, that's tough if you got to go there. The other part is it's just Ottinger's got this. When it comes down to the biggest games, it's lockdown time. He did it against Minnesota, and he did it against Seattle.
Here's the thing about this series. Dallas isn't relying on Jake Ottinger. They're not even relying on Jake Ottinger as much as they were last year. They're not relying on Jake Ottinger to steal them 4 games. They don't need to rely on Jake Ottinger to steal them 3 games. They can probably beat Vegas 3 times out of 6 on their own. This feels like the kind of series where they're going to need Jake Ottinger to steal them 1 game.
Yeah.
And it is very likely that is Game 6 or Game 7 when your back's against the wall, or when you're trying to win the series. Or it is very likely that that's the game that they're going to need Jake Ottinger to steal for them. And so far in his career, Jake Ottinger has done that. And at, 23 years old or whatever, however old he is, he's very young. It's a very small sample size, but every single time he's been in a situation where he has the opportunity to come up clutch, he has done so. I'm going to put the Dallas Stars back in the Stanley Cup Finals in 7 games.
Here's something we just kind of brought this up recently, but think about this. What was the most lopsided game in the Seattle-Dallas series?
5-1, 6-1.
It was the 7-2 in Game 3.
Oh, 7-2. I'm sorry.
And Seattle won, right? That was after, take Miro Heiskanen off the ice. That can happen, right? If they keep, that's the way you're going to beat Vegas, because Vegas is going to come at you in waves with different line combinations, and they've been able to kind of wear teams down with the wave. Like think about it. If it's not Stevenson, Eichel, Stone, then it's Carlson, Smith, and Marchessault. And if it's not them, then it's going to be,
it comes in
I
waves.
don't know, take your pick on the depth guys. It's going to be like Keegan Kolesar, and stuff like you're going to get these guys who show up, right? Like, that's the way it's been the entire playoff. If you can weather the storm and be that structure in front of Ottinger's going to have to make some big saves. It's going to happen in any series. But if you play the defensive structure, defensive structure, and the one thing I will say is that, really the only games that Dallas lost like that were, all right, a little shell-shocked in Game 1, 4 goals in the first period, and then locked it down until overtime, by the way. 7 in Game 3 without your best defenseman on the ice. And 6 in Game 6, where Seattle's backs were against the wall at home, and they came out with an energy that obviously got to you pretty quickly. But otherwise,
Dallas was overwhelmed in that game.
Right. But otherwise, I'm looking at a bunch of scores where you're defending well. And I look at Vegas Edmonton, and it's like, this is the offense for Edmonton is what they could do with McDavid and Draisaitl.
Right.
Now imagine a team that's got depth coming at you again, coming at you in waves again.
Because
realistically,
the thing is, you can match Stone and, you can match with McDavid and Draisaitl. You run out of
right.
ammo trying to match with
See,
Hintz and Robertson and Ben and Sagan and Johnston and.
right. Well, because realistically speaking, what series has Vegas played where the level of depth or something, at the top hasn't disappeared? Like,
Yep.
for goodness sake, we've got Rick Bowness telling you after the Winnipeg series,
No pushback.
all the top guys had no pushback.
Yep.
So nobody showed, like, it's as if to say nobody showed up.
The Vegas Golden Knights dropped a nuke into the middle of that team. That's an ugly situation.
Right. And then they play Edmonton, and after a certain point you realize it's McDavid, Draisaitl,
And everything
and what
else kind of dried up.
and what happened to everybody else. And oh, by the way, like, the only way we're going to even be in this series is to throw out, like, Evan Bouchard is taking 3-minute shifts at the end of game 6, trying to find a way to make it work because
and Evan Bouchard was great for the Edmonton Oilers, by the way. We kind of glossed over that when we talked about them earlier, but he really come out as a young emerging defenseman for them.
Overall body of work, great. I think it was in game.
Fair.
I believe it was in game 1. It might have been game 1. He had a moment where he had a Travis Sanheim moment. His feet just go right out from under him, and it happens sometimes. I'm not just placing the blame on him, but he had some ugly moments in that series because it wasn't, it wasn't what he was able to do against LA. It was different kind of team coming at you. This was the team with the most points in the Western Conference, and boy did they look like it, And I'm glad that this is the matchup that we get, that you get a division winner, a top team in the Western Conference, and Dallas, who was basically in the running for the division in the Central and could have easily won it.
If Vegas and Edmonton are the two best teams in the West, and that matchup, would be the best Western Conference final, I think this is probably about the second best matchup we could have come up with coming into the playoffs.
Coming into the playoffs, yeah.
Right. I'm definitely super happy with where we're at on this one. Now on the other side of things, this is not exactly the bracket final I think a lot of us had here. I will take credit. I did have Carolina sitting here, but not a whole lot of people had the team out of Florida. Carolina and Florida. Carolina will be the home team. Florida's halfway there. Has the magic run out? Have they finally run out of steam from beating Boston? Or is Carolina just a better team? Here's my thing. I'm looking at this series, and I don't see a path to victory for the Florida Panthers. But I also said that in the first 2 rounds. So I don't want to overlook magic. I don't want to overlook your George Mason run in the
Right. No, I gotcha.
But Carolina, like we said before, Carolina should win here. If Florida beats Carolina, they should win the Stanley Cup. It's a destiny thing. They're rolling. They're not going to lose. Bet the house on them. But please bet responsibly. But if Carolina wins like they probably should, then we have a real series in the finals.
Let me ask you this: when in the last series, the Florida Toronto series, is it just after game 1 that you're already thinking something, or does it?
It was 5 minutes into game 3.
Okay, fair enough.
When Florida's up 2-0 in the series and they're up 2-0 in game 3, the series ended then. Toronto broke in half.
My answer is a little different than yours. It wasn't after game 1, so I'll agree with you there. But for me, it was okay. They're up 2-0. Now I know, this isn't like an up 2-0 after winning 2 on the road. Well, Toronto's in trouble.
I think the fact that they were up 2-0 after 2 games and then Toronto came out and gave up 2 goals in the first 5 minutes of game 3, that really I had my hand hovering over the panic button at 2-0 and then 2 goals in 5 minutes and I smashed it.
That's because where I'm with you with this is that it was such an underwhelming effort in game 3 from Toronto, even though they were in the game. Like, it gets to overtime, it just was underwhelming. It didn't feel like a team that needed to be playing with that level of desperation.
And the Leafs were getting outplayed. Like, they were never going to win that game. Just watching it.
Different, because I'm with you. I think Carolina is poised at this point to make it. I'm not gonna complete like you know my rule on this. I'm having it go 7 because it's a coin flip to me.
I
Like,
can't count out the Destiny team.
well, exactly, and it's apparent who it is at this point. Like,
Yep.
now you're down to the point where it's like, okay, division winner, could have been a division winner, and the wild card.
And then the team who saved their playoffs with their third string goalie over the last 3 weeks of their season, who also continued to play great through round 1, and also here comes Bob, and he's back to Vezina winning form somehow after being terrible all year. We're writing a Disney movie. Like, we're writing the Disney movie. And that's why I'm saying if the Florida Panthers win here, I promise, I'm saying this on the show, if the Florida Panthers beat the Carolina Hurricanes, I will not pick against them in the Stanley Cup final. That being said, Hurricanes in 5.
In 5. Wow.
5. I'm gonna say here what I said right before the Devils series. The Carolina Hurricanes are the better team. They should win this series. They should dominate essentially every aspect, except maybe goaltending. I might give Florida the edge there. I will not be surprised if we're sitting here on our next show talking about a Florida Panthers Stanley Cup final appearance. But I have the Hurricanes in 5 as my actual pick.
And I'm gonna agree with you that I think it's gonna be Carolina, but I'm saying Carolina in 7 because I am not putting anything past the Florida Panthers at this point. I have picked against them twice at this point. I thought and I'm picking against them here too, in theory, but I'm doing the exact same thing
with your Game 7 coin flip.
And I'm doing the exact same thing I did before, which was I had Toronto, but I knew that Florida was going to mean business in that series. And I feel the same way here. I just feel like somehow or other, I feel like there's still non-believers out there, and as such, I hear you.
I'll admit it. And I know I might be wrong, but I've watched Sergei Bobrovsky forget how to play hockey too many times.
I'm going to be genuinely curious to see immediately, because you want to know what I believe about this series, truthfully? Carolina is not going to win this series the way they just won the series that they played against New Jersey. If they think that they're going to get shorthanded goals and Jordan Martinook and Jordan Stahl and, that kind of stuff, like Sebastian Aho is going to probably have to be the best player on the ice.
Storm surge is coming.
I think that that's all I'm saying. And of course, do I think he can be that player? Absolutely, I can. He was that player against the Islanders. So can he be that player? Of course he can. But I just don't think that you're going to be able to look at this at the end of the day and say Sebastian Aho didn't really score much, and neither did Martin Nakash. Like, that line's going to have to get going.
You know who gets hit by hurricanes a lot? Florida.
So now I'm curious about something, because you said something about this obviously the intriguing coaching matchup here is that Paul Maurice, a longtime coach of Carolina,
including coaching Rod Brind'Amour to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2002 and 2009.
Right, and we all know because we all know who the coach was in that other year.
Right,
we all know who that guy was. Right.
But Rod Brind'Amour against Paul Maurice, it is very interesting. I imagine they will have a conversation about it probably this summer, because they're both pretty competitive guys. But I imagine they'll go have a drink over it this summer. But either way, it's going to be super, super intense.
You've got some really fun ones here too, because you got the Vegas, Dallas. Everybody's already calling it the Pete DeBoer Revenge Tour,
and not a single media market that gets cold at any point in the.
I hear you. But listen, one thing I can tell you, one thing I am looking forward to is because now every single each game is isolated, so it's one a night once it gets started.
Yep.
Which probably means that, because with the way that they've had to bounce around from one to the next all the time, I don't know if we've gotten the Vegas introduction televised yet. I think we're going to start again.
Well, so funny.
I hope so. I would love to see it. Carolina's
the entire Eastern Series, Florida Carolina is on TNT. The Western Series, Dallas Vegas, is on the ESPN family between ESPN, ESPN Plus, and ABC. Game 2 on ABC is Game 2 Sunday ABC. That's going to be fun.
Because I don't have a gripe about the only gripe I have about the Eastern Conference Final is that it doesn't start tomorrow. It starts on Thursday.
That's fair.
That was my only gripe there. But the West Final, the only two gripes I have are Friday at 8:30 kind of sucks, and games, if it goes 7 games, game 7 would be at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night, which I think, again, like,
It's a little
kind of
for
a little
game
ridiculous.
7.
Well, it's just a little ridiculous. I can't tell you how much, though, I love the idea of Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock.
That's gonna be fantastic. Sorry,
These
2 o'clock Central Time.
I'm kind of pumping the tires on the Vegas intro thing. I love what Dallas does too, with the giant star coming down from the sea. Like, I hope we see all of it. Please do all of it.
I think we're going to. I think we're going to see a lot of it.
I mean, the only thing that would have been cooler is, if you would have gotten the all expansion bowl, like,
fair enough.
And Seattle's, because Seattle, I did catch what
Seattle
did
against
on
Vegas
YouTube.
would have been cool.
I did catch what Seattle did on YouTube for their intro, by the way.
Did you catch what Carolina did at the end of Game 5?
No, I didn't see this.
They posted a video on Twitter, and it was a celebratory, like a celebrity congratulations package.
Oh, I did see this.
And it was all notable figures from New Jersey.
Yes, I did see this.
Hilarious.
I thought you were
good job, Carolina. Congratulations on making it to the next round. Great job. Hilarious. Go look it up.
I loved the ones that were talking to somebody as if their name was Carolina.
Hello, Carolina. Yeah, I know. Cameo is an unhinged area. Anyway,
that was good. But
maybe,
yeah,
listen, if you want us to get on Cameo, let us know. You can tweet us at YWT Podcast.
If people really want me on Cameo, then listen, I'll take the money. Might
Right.
not be much, but I'll take it.
All right.
On that note,
if you're looking to hear our voices more, it's not going to be on Cameo this week, but we will be back after the conference finals for our next show. It'll be before the Stanley Cup final begins.
If you're looking to hear my voice more, I'm gonna get back to the video thing. I kind of took a bit of a hiatus in the middle of the playoffs because I wasn't exactly glued to every game in the past week.
Fair enough.
Well, between Flyers news and wedding stuff, it's like, it's enough. So
absolutely. And make sure to follow us everywhere for all of our stuff on that. Twitter at YWT Podcast. Kevin's at Kevin_Durso. Also at Kevin_Durso on Instagram. That's where he's doing a bunch of his playoff stuff. We will be back in a couple of weeks. You can find the show everywhere you find your podcast. Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, sportstalkphilly.com. We are everywhere. We will be back in a couple of weeks to talk about the Stanley Cup final and maybe the draft. We'll figure the rest out. We'll start talking a little bit more about the draft. Flyers have the 7th overall pick. Danny Briere and Keith Jones are in town now. It's a strange time to be a Flyers fan. It's a new era orange. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We'll see ya.